After entering the novel, the villain led me astray. Zhao Huiwei looked at the sharp knife across her head in horror, feeling desperate. Is it that serious? Do you think you are serious? Is it just because I scolded you for a whole day and night, and you sent me into this broken book? So excessive? It was a Shura field from the beginning, so where should she go? Zhao Huiwei wanted to die. Seeing the knife go in one more inch, she fell back in fear and said tremblingly, "Brave man, hold your knife steady, don't cause unnecessary accidental injuries." The man in black, ? Who was the one who was calmly going to die just now? However, as long as the person knew that she was afraid, he was not afraid of not being able to pry open her mouth, so he pushed the knife in one more inch and said angrily, "Tell me. Where is Shen Mingnan?" Shen Mingnan? Zhao Huiwei was stunned for a moment, and then remembered that at the beginning of the original book, the little village girl Zhao Huiwei accidentally saved the original villain Shen Mingnan. Shen Mingnan was originally the son of the Duke of Shen's mansion. His whereabouts were leaked by his trusted subordinates, which led to him being chased by assassins sent by the eldest son of Shen all the way and being seriously injured. He was chased all the way to Luohua village. The few days that Zhao Huiwei took him in to treat his injuries gave him time to contact his own secret guards and set up a dragnet, waiting for the group of assassins to come and deliver their heads. In order to induce this group of people to relax their vigilance, the bait was Zhao Huiwei, so Shen Mingnan watched his savior die tragically in the inner room without any reaction. Then he gave Zhao Huiwei a lavish burial as if he had a conscience, and also gave 5,000 taels of consolation money to the original body's mother who had remarried long ago. When Zhao Huiwei saw this, she felt a mouthful of old blood stuck in her throat and rolled her eyes fiercely. Why should she give money to someone who was dead? Or to the snobbish mother who abandoned her original body? This is to rub Zhao Huiwei's face on the ground left and right. In the original book, Zhao Huiwei was also stupid. She would rather die than expose the whereabouts of Shen Mingnan. One reason was the beam of righteous light shining on her. Secondly, she fell in love with Shen Mingnan at first sight, who was cold-hearted, cruel, and ruthless except for his good-looking face. This is where the dog-bloodedness comes from. In the original book, Zhao Huiwei was moved by herself and felt that she was brave and fearless. She used her life to protect her newly sprouted love. But Zhao Huiwei, who had just come through, said, why should she face such a horrible and bloody scene? She decisively said, I know. The man in black was a little dazed. Is it that simple? Shen Mingnan, who was hiding in the dark and peeping. Brave man, I know where he is. Can you wait for me? I will call him out. The man in black looked inside the door. Because of the dim light, he could not see anything clearly. In addition, this young woman decisively abandoned the dark and joined the light. According to Shen Mingnan's revengeful nature, this young woman would probably die as soon as she walked into the door. So he was relieved to let Zhao Huiwei lead the way for him. At the same time, he threatened fiercely to make himself look extraordinary and people dared not resist. Go and come back quickly. As long as you bring him to me, I will not only spare your life but also guarantee that you will have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of your life. Oh. Zhao Huiwei waited in her heart. What should I do if it was a little tempting? There was no way. Who told her that she was just a poor and useless little village girl? She turned around and entered the inner room without hesitation, and then quickly closed the door. With the help of the moonlight outside the window, she vaguely saw a figure lying on the bed. Very good, Shen Mingnan, who pretended to be dead, was caught by her. It was a pity that the original owner saved him. Just like the farmer and the snake, how could the poisonous snake be warm? But thinking of the villain who was still jumping around at the end of the book, Zhao Huiwei's originally heroic and high-spirited heart suddenly shrank. Now there is only one way to go. The villain will always be defeated by the villain. Don't believe in the light of justice. Just like her, she wanted to be the light even though she was powerless. When she died, she had no feeling below the neck. Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei cried unconsciously and fell weakly in front of Shen Mingnan's bed. Brother Shen, what should we do? Woo, the people outside are so fierce and I'm so scared. If you don't wake up, they will rush in and chop us like watermelons. Shen Mingnan, who had already opened his eyes in the darkness. He resisted the urge to strangle her to death, struggled to get up, and said weakly, Benefactor, what's wrong with you? Zhao Huiwei choked on her tears, so why did she still compete with her in acting skills at this critical moment? Why did she pretend to be so powerful? Zhao Huiwei cried even louder. It was just like a storm crying, "Woo woo, your enemies are here to kill you." Chapter 2, Benefactor, are you alright? Seeing Shen Mingnan remain silent, Zhao Huiwei thought he hadn't heard her, so she moved closer and raised her voice. Your enemy has come for you. What should we do? Yes, she said we. Shen Mingnan shouldn't think he could just ditch her and run away on his own. The woman in front of him looked panicked, her eyes filled with unshed tears, gazing at him anxiously. Shen Mingnan, who typically detested others getting too close to him, could barely endure the pain in his body as he awkwardly shifted back. Just as he was about to say something, the door was suddenly kicked open with a loud bang. Zhao Huiwei jumped in shock and quickly looked over. She saw a black-clad figure with a mask, stepping into the room. His eyes were wide open and filled with viciousness, and in a rough voice, he said, "Did you yell so loudly to make sure the people outside can hear? I really gave you face. Asking for people and dragging this out here. I'm so annoyed. You two can die now." Zhao Huiwei was stunned, her mouth dropping open. Damn. Shen Mingnan. The black-clad man raised his knife and swung it down fiercely, but it stopped just above Zhao Huiwei's head. There was a sound as a sharp knife pierced into the black-clad man's body, and it went straight through to Zhao Huiwei's face. The next second, the blooded knife was pulled out. Zhao Huiwei's eyes widened in shock, unable to believe she was witnessing a murder scene in her lifetime. The black-clad man bled profusely from the wound, blood pouring out like a fountain. His wide eyes stared, unblinking, and just so happened to meet Zhao Huiwei's gaze. Terrified, she felt as though she would die on the spot. After the shock, fear, and witnessing the murder, Zhao Huiwei fainted by the bed, just as expected. The scene fell into a deathly silence. And surprisingly, the two bodies lying on the floor seemed almost harmonious. Yang Yuan, walking lightly, stepped over the black-clad body and casually pulled Zhao Huiwei, who was lying next to the bed, to one side. He then respectfully asked the person on the bed, "Master, are you alright?" Shen Mingnan shook his head, his gaze heavy as he looked at the fainted Zhao Huiwei. Following Shen Mingnan's gaze, Yang Yuan noticed Zhao Huiwei once again. A cold glint flashed in his eyes. He had forgotten that this woman had just tried to hand over his master. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Master, this woman, if she..." He made a gesture across his throat. Although Shen Mingnan felt disgusted, he endured it with the upbringing of a noble family, shaking his head. No, she might still be useful. He glanced out the window at the darkening sky and let out a cold laugh. With this much noise, Shen Shuyu's spies want to make a move. In Beijing, Chen Yu secretly sent 3 waves of assassins to try to kill me. This plan is delayed. I'll stay here to recuperate. If they come again, we'll eliminate them all according to the original plan. If they don't come, once I recover, I'll take everything back. After speaking, Shen Mingnan felt a sharp pain in his chest and waved weakly. You go back first. Tell Yu Huai and the others not to act rashly. Yang Yuan hesitated for a moment before respectfully cupping his hands. Yes. Wait. First, throw the body into the mountain behind and feed it to the wolves, then clean up the bloodstains before leaving. Understood. Yang Yuan bent over to drag the black-clad body away, then glanced at Zhao Huiwei, before turning his gaze to his master. What about her? Shen Mingnan had already laid back on the bed and didn't he even spare a glance in their direction. He spoke faintly, let her lie there. It won't cause any trouble. Yang Yuan. What else could Yang Yuan say? He could only finish what Shen Mingnan had ordered, leaving Zhao Huiwei to lie there like a corpse. Zhao Huiwei had a nightmare the entire night. She dreamt that she was being chased by countless black-clad men. Her little short legs were about to break from running, but she still fell into their hands. Sobbing, she was thrown onto a cold chopping board, the pain from lying on it making her bones ache. Feeling cold in her body and heart, Zhao Huiwei cried uncontrollably as the black-clad men grinned and approached her, ready to strike. The terror was so real that she jolted awake, sitting upright in bed. The sky outside had started to brighten, and her wildly beating heart finally calmed down. Thankfully, it was just a dream. She glanced around, seeing the same shabby brick house, with peeling walls showing the reddish-brown bricks underneath. This place. Zhao Huiwei, who had been relieved it was just a dream, suddenly felt her face fall. This isn't a dream at all. This is the nightmare. She looked at her position great, she was still lying on the cold floor, not having moved a single inch. No wonder her dream involved chopping boards and bone-crushing pain. Lying here the entire night, how could it not hurt? The black-clad man's body was gone, and she had no idea what happened after that. Benefactor, are you all right? Zhao Huiwei, lost in her thoughts, suddenly heard this cold, clear voice, which startled her so much that she hit her head against the bed's edge with a loud thud. Chapter 3, The Noble Young Master. Shen Mingnan? Why hadn't this man left yet? Zhao Huiwei took several steps back in shock, and when she looked up, she found herself meeting Shen Mingnan's concerned gaze. But wait, according to the original plot, after Zhao Huiwei died, Shen Mingnan should be left that very night for the capital. After all, the female lead, the woman he loved, was waiting for him in the hands of the male lead for him to rescue. But now, can someone tell her why this person was still at her house? Benefactor. Zhao Huiwei felt a chill run down her spine at his coldly laced voice. I'm fine. She glanced at the sky outside, which had already brightened, and hurriedly added, I'll go make breakfast for you. With that, she practically scrambled out of the room. Shen Mingnan. Why the sudden shift in behavior? He remembered just a few days ago, Zhao Huiwei had looked at him with shy, timid eyes, which made him feel disgusted. Now, not only was she avoiding looking at him, but she was also trembling as she spoke to him. Unable to come up with a reason, Shen Mingnan concluded that it must have been the terrifying scene from last night that scared her so much. In the kitchen, Zhao Huiwei finally felt like she was alive again. She sat down on a small stool by the stove, apologizing profusely to the author, and even the author's ancestors, while mentally reviewing the plot of the original novel. The novel, called Jinxiu Huashan, was a classic early romance story. It centered on the female protagonist, whose beauty and cleverness earned her the admiration of a vast number of admirers, ultimately leading her to the throne, adored by the crown prince. Of course, the true winner in the original story was the male protagonist, Prince Cheng Yu. How could it be otherwise when he had power, wealth, and good looks? Under his coercion and temptation, the female protagonist was eventually taken by him. For now, she belonged to the male protagonist, but this was temporary. After the original antagonist learned of the situation, he swiftly dealt with the waves of assassins sent after him, then rushed to the capital to rescue the female lead. As one might expect, how could the antagonist defeat the male lead's aura? But he didn't leave empty-handed. At the very least, he significantly boosted the female lead's favorability, which in turn caused the male lead to become extremely jealous and vow to kill the antagonist, Shen Mingnan. The rest of the story followed a typical plot where the antagonist chased and fought with the male lead in a dramatic cat-and-mouse game, ensuring the plot remained full of twists. This novel used a reverse timeline technique, starting with the relationships between the male lead and the antagonist toward the female lead. It seemed confusing at first, but as the story unfolded, the past relationships and emotional development between them were revealed. However, Zhao Huiwei mostly skimmed through the middle parts, often feeling lost. She only fully paid attention when the antagonist completely darkened, then jumped straight to the ending, where the crown prince and the female lead got married, while Shen Mingnan died on the battlefield. Zhao Huiwei froze for a moment. Shouldn't Shen Mingnan be rushing to the capital by now? Why was he still staying at her house? How was the plot supposed to continue? With his notorious ability to attract hatred, it would be no surprise if 3 assassination attempts came his way in a single day. Without any clue on how to return to reality, Zhao Huiwei had to cling to her life. If she died, it would all be over. So, the best plan was to feed him well, make sure he recovered as soon as possible, and get him back to the capital to compete for the female lead with the male protagonist. With that thought, Zhao Huiwei felt a burst of energy and moved quickly to prepare rice for cooking. Looking at the sparse amount of rice left in the jar, she fell into silence again. Damn it! She cooked all the remaining rice, stir-fried a small plate of vegetables, and steamed a few sweet potatoes. There was no other choice. The original owner's family was poor, and Zhao Huiwei had to rummage through cabinets to find the half-pound of flour and a few sweet potatoes that the original owner's grandmother had sent. She could have been better off, but after she found Shen Mingnan, she spent all her savings on buying him medicine and a few pounds of rice and flour to help him recover. Meanwhile, she had to survive on the bare minimum, eating poor food and looking malnourished. At 16, she looked no older than a 12-year-old child. If it weren't for the hairpins she wore, her flat chest and skinny frame would have made everyone mistake her for a young boy. Zhao Huiwei ate a few bites, then consumed 2 sweet potatoes, finally feeling alive again. She carefully portioned out some food and brought it to the inner room. She gently pushed open the door and immediately saw Shen Mingnan leaning against the head of the bed. He was gazing out the window, the light from outside casting on his exquisite, jade-like profile. His stillness made him look like a painting, one you wouldn't dare disturb. Hearing the noise, Shen Mingnan turned his head to look at Zhao Huiwei. His long black hair was loosely tied, his brows slightly furrowed, and his black, glittering peach blossom eyes locked onto her. His high nose and thin lips, though pale, held a sickly beauty. His expression was calm, and he spoke with barely any emotion. Benefactor. Zhao Huiwei stood there, her face frozen as she felt the overwhelming impact of Shen Mingnan's beauty. No wonder the original owner fell in love at first sight. With a face like his, anyone would. He truly was a noble young master, unparalleled in the world. Chapter for life is not easy, Hui sighs. However, after knowing the content of the original book and understanding that he was a handsome but cruel man, all the surprise in her heart disappeared when she thought of it. This kind of handsome man should be left to the heroine to enjoy. Brother Shen, come and eat something. Shen Mingnan glanced at the simple meal and said with gratitude, "Thank you, benefactor." Zhao Huiwei swallowed her saliva, smiled stiffly and waved her hand, "You're welcome." He put down the food and ran out without hesitation. Don't think that she didn't see the disgust in his eyes. Zhao Huiwei, who was afraid that Shen Mingnan would draw his knife because he was dissatisfied with the food, ran away decisively. As long as she runs fast enough, fear can't catch up with her. Shen Mingnan, who still wanted to chat with Zhao Huiwei, said, "Is he really that scary?" He stirred the porridge in front of him with an expressionless face, hesitated for a moment and took a sip. The porridge was mushy. Zhao Huiwei didn't know whether Shen Mingnan would eat the food or not. She just felt very worried now. It was only May, so why did she feel so cold? Oh, so it's because of the poor family background. The original owner's family was very poor, really poor. The original owner's father was the only scholar in Luohua village and also the private school teacher in the village. The original owner was also happy. Although her family was not very wealthy, her parents were loving and the family was harmonious, so she grew up in love. Until 6 years ago, her father died in an accident, which was a bolt from the blue for Zhao Huiwei, who once lived a happy life. Her mother, whom she depended on and respected, abandoned her when she was only 10 years old and remarried in the neighboring village 3 months after her father's death. The original owner's daughter was forced to stay in Luohua village after her crying. On the day she remarried, she took away all the savings of more than 100 taels of silver left by her original father. The only valuable thing left to her original father was this blue brick and tile house. Then he coaxed the original body and said that he would come to pick her up once she had established herself in that family. Now 6 years have passed, not to mention coming to pick her up, no one even came to visit her. However, the original owner still heard from others that she became pregnant not long after she got married, and gave birth to a boy for that family the following year, and they shared the family happiness. I guess they have forgotten her a long time ago. Little Zhao Huiwei grew up with the help of her original grandmother and uncles and aunts. Normally she would go to the mountains to pick herbs and sell them in town for money. It was because her original body knew how to identify herbs, otherwise how would she have met the seriously injured Shen Mingnan? Well. Zhao Huiwei sighed for the 101st time. Well, in order not to go hungry she had to go to the mountains to find something to sell in town. Following the original owner's memory, she knew that the mountain behind her house was the largest mountain in the surrounding area, Daliang Mountain. The mountain is lush and leafy, half of it is sunny and half is extremely dark. The dark side is what the older generation calls the deep mountains, which cannot be entered. Anyway, I heard from the villagers that no one who went in came out alive. No one dared to go in and look for it, so over time it became a restricted area. The medicinal herbs Zhao Huiwei was looking for were just outside, a relatively safe area. Life is not easy, Hui sighed. I remember that she was on holiday yesterday, enjoying the air conditioning and eating watermelon at home, and complaining about the author at the same time. It was sent here directly today for transformation. I don't know what the situation is like over there. I wonder if her parents would be sad and cry if they knew she was gone. Zhao Huiwei shrugged her nose in grievance when she thought of this. Then before leaving, he put the remaining food on the stove to heat it up, stood at the door with the backpack in his hand and said loudly, "Brother Shen, I'm going to the mountain and may not be back at noon. I'll heat up the food for you on the stove." After saying these words, he left quickly without waiting for Shen Mingnan to reply. After she left, Shen Mingnan stood up wearing a cotton dress. This set of clothes belonged to Zhao Huiwei's father. It was a little small for him, but it was better than nothing. Although Zhao Huiwei repeatedly assured that no one had ever worn this set of clothes, Shen Mingnan still disliked it. However, he had to make do with it as it was not appropriate for him to reveal his identity now. What surprised Shen Mingnan was that Zhao Huiwei, the person who used to want to be in front of him 12 hours a day, suddenly became afraid of him. Before he could figure it out, he heard a noise, and the sound was getting closer and closer until it entered Zhao Huiwei's yard. Chapter 5, Broken Engagement. Zhao Huiwei climbed up the mountain under the scorching sun with high morale. She was so excited just thinking that she would have money after collecting herbs, and that she could buy delicious food with the money and wouldn't have to go hungry. A woman came towards them, carrying a bunch of uprooted weeds in her backpack. She also saw Zhao Huiwei and greeted her with a smile. "Hey, Huihui, you came to the mountain to look for herbs." Zhao Huiwei searched her memory for a moment. This was the village's Zhao Sunsha. Everyone in the village called her son Ernyan, so Zhao Huiwei nodded and said, "Yes." Then she looked at son Ernyan's backpack and asked, "Son Ernyan, what did you pick from the mountain?" Son Ernyan's eyes dodged for a moment, avoiding Zhao Huiwei's sight of the backpack. "It's just some wild vegetables. Gauden's father is waiting for me to go back and cook. I'll leave first." Zhao Huiwei was stunned for a moment. Son Ernyan obviously didn't want her to know, so she left in a hurry. It's really confusing, how could she still be thinking about those weeds? When they really arrived at the place, Zhao Huiwei had a gloomy face and was in tears. Is it too late for her to think about it now? What Son Ernyan has is not weeds at all, it is clearly medicinal herbs, with a layer of weeds spread on top as camouflage. It's speechless to say, Zhao Huiwei's kindness has spread to all the villages around. Take identifying medicinal herbs for example. She studied the books of her late father and found a medical book among them. She recognized several herbs in the book after just a few glances. She never concealed the fact that she came here to collect herbs to make money, which led to villagers, young and old, men, women, and children coming to her to learn how to identify herbs. When others asked, the original owner taught, just like that, "Where are the herbs in this area? This area has been completely plucked out, and it looks completely bare at first glance." Seeing that there was nothing to pick, Zhao Huiwei felt hopeless and looked for a shady place to cool off. The warm sun made people drowsy, and Zhao Huiwei fell asleep on the mountain. Until Hui. Something bad has happened. Wake up. What the hell? Zhao Huiwei, who was still dreaming, was woken up by the shock. The strong shaking made her want to vomit, so she pushed away the hands that were pulling her away with all her strength and told them to stop shaking, or she would vomit if she continued. Seeing Zhao Huiwei wake up, the visitor looked anxious. "Wake up and go home quickly, your engagement has been cancelled." "What? Break off the engagement? What kind of break off?" Zhao Huiwei, who was still confused, was dragged back. So much so that when she entered the courtyard, she saw a group of people looking at her with gossipy eyes, and she was stunned for a moment. How come there are so many guests coming to her house when she has only been out for half a day? When Zhao Huiwei was thinking about how to greet them, an old lady pulled her to the middle and said angrily, "You silly girl, why are you still standing here in a daze at this time? Explain quickly, don't let Madame Yarn cancel this marriage. What will you do if she cancels it?" The old woman was the original body's grandmother, Zhao Qianxia. The anxiety on her face could not be faked. Zhao Huiwei then looked at the woman next to Zhao Qianxia. The woman looked sickly, but she acted very mean with airs. Next to her was a handsome young man with a blushing face, who seemed to be persuading his mother to go back, but Madame Yarn was unmoved and glared at him. She waved the handsome young man away, stood in front of Zhao Huiwei and said with disgust, "This marriage was arranged when your father was still alive. I didn't think of cancelling the engagement for your father's sake, but look at what you have done. If I hadn't come here today, I would still be kept in the dark and let you have an affair with your lover." After seeing the woman, Zhao Huiwei belatedly realized that she really had a fiancé. He was the second scholar after the original owner's father, Zhao Rongyu, and his name was Yang Mingting. But the lover and affair mentioned by Madame Yang. The next second, Zhao Huiwei looked in the direction of her finger. Even his coarse clothes could not hide the elegance in his eyes and eyebrows. He sat at the door, a hint of impatience flashed in his eyes, and when he saw Zhao Huiwei appear, the light in his eyes became even colder. The next second he covered his eyes again and coughed weakly. Zhao Huiwei, how did you invite this ancestor out? Zhao Huiwei was crying in her heart, she couldn't scold anyone but him. Zhao Huiwei was really afraid that this gentleman would hold a grudge against her and kill her that night. She looked at Madame Yang with a cold sweat on her face. Please don't misunderstand me. This is just a young man I saved in the mountains. He will leave after his injury heals. How dare she attribute this mistress's bad reputation to Shin Mingnan? Chapter 6. One good thing will make your heart immortal. Perhaps it was because Zhao Huiwei's answer was too powerful and too serious that the scene fell into rare silence for a second. Madame Yang was also stunned for a moment. This indeed didn't look like an affair, but she didn't care. Her son had such a bright future, but having a village girl as his fiancée only served as a burden to her. No matter how cruel or heartless she is, she will never let Zhao Huiwei influence her son in the slightest. She glared at Zhao Huiwei fiercely. Do you have no shame? Boys and girls should not sit together at the same table after the age of 7. You and he have slept in the same room, so aren't you his mistress? I'm going to put my words here today. You have to cancel this marriage. Our Yang family can't afford a daughter-in-law as shameless as you. Hearing this, Zhao Huiwei, no matter how good her temper was, became furious. Madame Yang kept calling her shameless and mistress. Wasn't this just trampling on her reputation? Although she didn't really care about these things, it didn't mean that she would lose face and let her step on it like that. Her face turned cold, and her clear-cut eyes seemed to reflect the ugliness in the hearts of these people. Under Zhao Huiwei's gaze, Madame Yang felt ashamed for a moment. If you insist on putting such a hat on me, I won't recognize it. My fellow villagers and uncles, you have been watching me grow up since I was a child. My character since childhood is very clear to all uncles and aunts. I have never done anything immoral. My father taught me since childhood that if one's heart is filled with goodness, it will be immortal for eternity, and 100 lights will illuminate 1,000 miles. I saved a life, and I have a clear conscience. Zhao Huiwei's powerful words woke up everyone present. Yes, they watched Zhao Huiwei grow up, from a delicate little girl into a graceful young lady. She has liked helping others since she was a child, and often quotes her father's words, saying that she wants to be a person like her father when she grows up. In the entire Luohua village, there is no one that Zhao Huiwei has not helped. An old lady at the side suddenly burst into tears. My grandson had a high fever in the middle of the night 2 years ago. I was the only old woman sick in bed at home. It was Huihui who heard the noise and carried Hutu out, and asked old Liu to take my grandson to town. Such a good person, you framed her like this. I'll be the first one to disagree. Many people in the village couldn't help but think of Zhao Huiwei's father, Zhao Shucai. That kind-hearted man taught them how to plant, taught their children how to read, and showed kindness to the lonely elderly. To put it bluntly, there was no one in the entire Luohua village who had not benefited from his kindness. Including Madame Yang's family, they all received guidance from Mr. Zhao and passed the examination for students at a young age. They also passed the examination for scholars by reading the notes written by Mr. Zhao. Everyone was waiting for his efforts, just because he was so selfless, but at this time they watched his only daughter's reputation being ruined and everyone was indifferent. Shame on them, they really are. Zhao Huiwei didn't know what she was thinking about, and her eyes became moist. She left everyone behind and ran straight into their house. Not long after, she took out a small jade pendant. This is the engagement token between Yang Mingting and I. I am returning it to you now. I hope we can get married and never have any disputes again. When these words came out, everyone was shocked and hurriedly advised, don't act on impulse. If you lose this marriage, where can you find such a good one? Madame Yang was also embarrassed by Zhao Huiwei's conversation, but, if a man does not work for himself, he will be punished by heaven and earth. Even if she was stabbed in the back or cursed, she wanted her son to have a clean life and fight for a bright future. She took the small jade pendant and returned the engagement token given by Mr. Zhao, which was a piece of mutton fat jade that looked very valuable. Zhao Huiwei took it and found it soft and smooth to the touch. It was a good product. The token has been returned. I hope you won't regret it in the future. Madame Yarn left after saying such a confusing sentence. Zhao Huiwei could only laugh it off. Maybe she wanted to say something harsh to save face because she was humiliated. Hey, mother. The handsome young man watched his mother leave without looking back and became so anxious that his face turned red and his neck became thick. He looked at Zhao Huiwei again, his face full of apology. Sister Huiwei, don't take it to heart, my mother, she was just too anxious, don't worry, I will give you an explanation. After saying that, he hurriedly chased after Madame Yarn. You are confused. How can you be so confused? If you insist on not giving up on this marriage, I'm sure Madame Yarn won't dare to say anything more. Such a good marriage, how could it be lost? How can I be worthy of your dead father? Zhao Qian was really sad and her eyes were red from crying. She really loved Zhao Huiwei, but it was a pity that this child lost her father and her mother when she was young. Unfortunately, the girl was very stubborn and insisted on staying in her father's house. She refused to move with her to the old house, saying that there was her father's scent and traces here. When a person dies, it is like a light being extinguished. There is no trace left but the thought buried in the heart. Chapter 7 Benefactor, Don't be sad. Zhao Huiwei felt overwhelmed when she heard her crying, so she had to pretend to be distraught and went back to their house. Shen Mingnan, who was sitting outside watching the show, entered the inner room at some point. Zhao Huiwei did not pay any attention to him, but instead looked at Yu with shining eyes. Everyone thought that Zhao Huiwei was hiding in the house feeling disheartened, but she was just wondering how much this jade was worth. Shen Mingnan in the inner room had a rare change of opinion about Zhao Huiwei, which made him curious about what kind of righteous man the father must be to be able to raise a girl like Zhao Huiwei. Zhao Huiwei was speechless after this incident. Fortunately, her original body had been kind-hearted since childhood, so saving people was a normal thing for her. Otherwise, it would have been a difficult ending. Although the separation of men and women was not a serious issue in this dynasty, it was no longer a good idea for men and women to live in the same room. But it still has an impact, and I guess it will be difficult to get married in the future. Zhao Huiwei was too lazy to think about these things anymore. She focused her attention on the mutton fat jade and thought to herself that this was at least one of the relics of the original owner's father, and it was a relatively valuable relic. If she pawned it, the original owner's father's spirit would probably be so angry that he would come and scold her to wake her up at night. Zhao Huiwei put the thought aside for a moment and instead recalled the scene of the broken engagement. There is no such thing as breaking off an engagement in the original text. The original owner died too early and the engagement she had made before was no longer valid. After the original body died, Madame Yarn cried in front of Zhao Huiwei's coffin. Others praised them for their loyalty and righteousness, and she swallowed the mutton fat jade. As for Yang Mingting, Zhao Huiwei had no impression of him at first, but after thinking about it carefully, he stood up in shock. Isn't Yang Mingting the new #1 scholar who passed the imperial examination the following year in the original text? She broke off the engagement with the new #1 scholar. Zhao Huiwei reacted and fell back into the chair again. The salted fish life slipped through my fingers again. Shen Mingnan leaned weakly against the door, and found it interesting to see someone jumping up and down in shock. He coughed twice more and said in a hoarse voice, "Are you sad because of the cancellation of the engagement?" Scare. Why did this person suddenly appear again? Shen Mingnan now looks sick, giving people the illusion that he may die at any time. Zhao Huiwei jumped up in fright again and hurriedly held his sleeve, fearing that he would suddenly faint and bring bad luck. When he touched Zhao Huiwei's warm palm, his whole body stiffened. He resisted the urge to push her away and stood with his eyes lowered. Well, you mean to cancel the engagement? I don't really feel sad at all. What Zhao Huiwei said was the truth. She was a fake who had just come here, why would she be hurt? The only thing that made her sad was that the place was so poor and she was so hungry. But Shen Mingnan didn't think so. She felt that she was hiding the pain with a smile. How could a woman whose engagement had been broken off find a good family with conditions as good as Yarn Xiuzai's? This is obviously just pretending to be strong. Shen Mingnan was silent for a second, and then comforted him again, "Don't be sad, benefactor. A good person like you will always meet someone who is good to you." Zhao Huiwei. Look, this is something a villain should say. Could it be that this guy is sick and confused because I didn't buy him medicine today? And which I have his so that she was sad. Of course, the most important point is that you are a villain. Do you know what villains are? They are all irrelevant. Please recognize your position and don't do things that are inconsistent with your character. For example, at this moment, force-feeding people chicken soup for the soul. Although she felt horrified, Zhao Huiwei still nodded her head and agreed, yes, 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 you are right. I will help you go back and rest. Don't get tired. Shen Mingnan. Don't think he didn't feel perfunctory. He glanced at her coldly and turned aside to avoid her hand. No need to trouble my benefactor. After saying that, he went back to the inner room and closed the door. Zhao Huiwei could sense someone suddenly getting angry. She blinked her round almond eyes and thought carefully and attentively about the reason why he suddenly got angry. By combining the incident with the current situation, Zhao Huiwei felt that she could work out the Pythagorean theorem. Of course, she came to a conclusion in the end. That is, Shen Mingnan was hungry and he was silently resisting. Looking at the only half-pound of flour left at home, Zhao Huiwei went to the stove and cursed in her heart. This is really a waste of money, oh, so sad. Chapter 8, When Jade. The next morning, Zhao Huiwei spent a penny to take old Liuto's ox cart to the town. She was going to the town to do something important today. She wants to pawn the jade. Of course, this was a major decision she made after being woken up by hunger twice during the night. Dad, you will definitely forgive me in heaven, right? If your fake daughter starves to death, you will really be left without a daughter. Zhao Huiwei really shed tears of sorrow. Other people who travel through books either have golden fingers or are proficient in martial arts and medical skills. To her, he is a complete waste, incompetent at nothing and eats nothing. Before she came here, she was a junior student, majoring in finance, and was waiting to graduate and go home to inherit her father's company. Oh no, now go inherit it in your dream. Luohua village, Zhao Huiwei's home. Not long after she left, a figure quickly came in. If Zhao Huiwei was there, she would definitely recognize that this was Yang Yuan who stabbed the man in black to death. Yang Yuan came this time to deliver medicine to Shen Mingnan, otherwise his master would have died of illness long ago just with those bags of medicine bought by Zhao Huiwei. Shen Mingnan pinched the pill and swallowed it directly. After a moment, his face became much redder. Where's she? Where's she going? Yang Yuan was stunned for a moment before he realized who his master was talking about. Miss Zhao has gone to town. In town? He knew that Zhao Huiwei had gone out early in the morning, but he didn't know what she was going to do. After a moment's silence, he slowly said, "Send someone to follow her. I want to know everything she has done and who she has come into contact with." Yang Yuan accepted the order and prepared to leave, but then he remembered something and spoke again. "Master, the latest news is that Miss Nan Jia is imprisoned in the prince's mansion." Hearing this, Shen Mingnan sneered, playing with imprisonment. It is indeed Sheng Yu's style. He dared to tie up the daughter of a minister in the court. He was really not afraid of being criticized. He sneered, waved his hand to signal Yang Yuan to leave, and said in a cold and light voice, "He won't succeed, I promise." Luohua village was not far from Xinglin town, and it only took half an hour by ox cart. Zhao Huiwei jumped off the car as soon as the car arrived at the station. She felt so shaken by the ride that her bones were about to fall apart. After getting off the car, I quickly stretched my muscles and felt alive again. After hearing what old Liu said, he would wait at this intersection at noon. The quaint town buildings looked grey, with the only thing of some color being the winding bluestone road on the ground. Vegetable sellers were already chatting with each other on both sides of the road. The roadside shops were all open, with steaming bun shops and busy restaurants. At this moment, Zhao Huiwei felt as if she had really come to ancient times. But her purpose this time was not to appreciate the town. She spent 2 cents to buy a meat bun. After filling her stomach, she searched through the original owner's memory and found a not-too-big pawn shop in the most remote corner of the town. She took a look at the name, Shinshin Pawn Shop. The name was very meaningful. It was probably to advise people who came in to pawn things to think carefully, right? You know what, it's quite thoughtful. I'll choose this one. The light in the pawn shop was not bright. There was an old man sitting behind the counter, calculating on his abacus as if no one was around. Hearing the noise of someone coming in, he didn't even blink, and asked in a hoarse voice, "Live or dead?" Zhao Huiwei had already made up her mind when she came here. Because this was the engagement token returned by Madame Yarn, she felt really disgusted when looking at it, so she decided to pawn it and not come back to redeem the jade. Zhao Huiwei said calmly, "Death." I said to myself, "Dad, this piece is not good. I will get you a better one later." Hearing the word death, the old man raised his head. He looked at the mutton fat jade and found it was a top-grade jade. 300 taels, is it worth it? After giving a number, the old man continued to fiddle with his abacus. Zhao Huiwei quickly made a calculation in her mind, which was enough for her to relax for a while. When? The old man nodded and wrote a certificate. Zhao Huiwei recognized the traditional Chinese characters by guessing. It probably meant to confirm that the item would be pawned after death, and future sales would have nothing to do with the seller. It was no big deal, so Zhao Huiwei pressed her fingerprints. Seeing the old man getting up to get the silver, Zhao Huiwei said quickly, "I want 10 taels of silver, and the rest will be exchanged for banknotes." After walking out with the money, Zhao Huiwei looked friendly and amiable in everything she did. Zhao Huiwei bought dozens of kilograms of rice and noodles, weighed 5 kilograms of fat meat to prepare for oil extraction, and bought a lot of seasonings. Everything she eats recently tastes bland. Finally, they went to the clinic and described Shen Mingnan's condition. It cost 5 taels of silver just to get the medicine. When getting the medicine, Zhao Huiwei was cursing all the way. Not only is he a glutton but is also a spendthrift. However, whenever she thought about Shen Mingnan leaving after he recovered from his injuries, she felt that life was worth it. Chapter 9. Nothing more than that. Because Zhao Huiwei bought so many things, when the waiters from various stores delivered them, old Liu's ox cart was filled to the brim. Zhao Huiwei discussed it with old Liu and decided to pay 10 cents to rent the ox cart and set off immediately. Old Liu also agreed, but he only accepted 7 cents from Zhao Huiwei. Zhao Huiwei's house was built in a remote location, so she didn't meet many people when she entered the village. When she got home, Zhao Huiwei paid the fare and started moving her things into their house. When Shen Mingnan heard the noise, he stood up and watched for a moment. Seeing so many things, I couldn't help but raise my eyebrows. Where did this little country girl make her fortune? At this moment, Zhao Huiwei was struggling with a bag of rice, hugging it left and right, but she couldn't hold it. While Zhao Huiwei was still worrying, a shadow fell on her head, and a slender, white, and bony hand easily lifted the bag of rice. Zhao Huiwei looked up and saw Shen Mingnan's weak and pale handsome face. "My benefactor, I'll help you carry it." Zhao Huiwei saw that he looked so weak, and she really didn't expect him to be so strong. Although it was good that someone helped her, but Zhao Huiwei was a little hesitant, with a little more concern in her eyes. "Are you okay with your injury? Why don't you go back and rest and I'll take care of it?" Zhao Huiwei was worried that he would show off his strength. After all, she had seen the knife wounds on his body. What if the wound broke open while lifting a heavy object and she fainted on the spot? She felt exhausted just thinking about having to carry Mi and hold him at the same time. Shen Mingnan's usually gentle peach blossom eyes darkened. Zhao Huiwei, who was very good at observing people's expressions, tactfully let go of the rice bag and dared not say anything more. He carried the rice and walked forward. "Don't worry, benefactor, this little injury won't cause any trouble." Zhao Huiwei, who was at the back, heard this and felt that she should encourage him to ease the atmosphere, so she nodded affirmatively. "Yeah, brother Shen, you are awesome. You are still so strong even when you are injured. You are worthy of being you." Shen Mingnan paused for a moment, then walked forward again. If you look closely, you can see that his hand holding the rice bag tightened, and the veins on the back of his hand were bulging. He threw the rice on the floor, waved his sleeves and went back into the inner room. Zhao Huiwei was speechless. This person is so difficult to serve. No matter how I encourage him, he gets angry too. Last time I agreed with him, he got angry too. He is just a primary school kid who can only sulk and sulk. On the one hand, Shen Mingnan was worried that the assassin might come again, so he quickly carried her away to use her as a shield. On the other hand, Zhao Huiwei was afraid that the big villain would not say anything now but was actually waiting for a retaliation later, so she decided to take this opportunity to improve the big villain's favorability. "I don't ask for repayment of favors, I just ask that you don't repay kindness with enmity." Shen Mingnan returned to the inner room and covered the wound with his hand. He didn't expect that this little country girl said one thing and did another behind his back. It seems like the praise is not sincere at all, and it is just perfunctory. He sneered. It was only because she saved his life and he had changed his opinion of her that he didn't want to let these bloody things get involved with her. Otherwise, she thought that the past 2 days were so peaceful. It was because his men outside killed anyone who came to assassinate him. But now Shen Mingnan decided to withdraw the outside sentry. Dong dong. Someone knocked on the window from outside. Shen Mingnan calmed down and said indifferently, "Climb in." Yang Yuan outside. He carefully propped up the window and actually crawled in like a big insect. "Master, this window is too small." Yang Yuan brushed off the dust on his body. With his tall and mighty body, climbing through a small window was really torture for him. He hoped that his master could hear his hidden meaning and quickly get a bigger window for this little village girl. Shen Mingnan glanced at it calmly and said, "This is not my home." Yang Yuan. Well, his master's subconscious intention is not to change. Chapter 10. I spent money to buy her engagement token. "Master, look what this is," Yang Yuan said as he showed the thing in his hand like a treasure. Shen Mingnan leaned against the head of the bed, took a look, and reached out to take it. "Why does this thing look a little familiar? Didn't you ask your subordinates to send someone to follow her today? We found that she went into Mr. Ju's pawn shop and she pawned this piece of jade." Then he added, "It's better to die." Shen Mingnan. No wonder it looks familiar, isn't this the engagement token between her and Mr. Yan? No wonder I'm rich today, so this is how it works. But, what does this have to do with him? Shen Mingnan instantly became impatient. "Let her be hers, why are you taking her things?" Yang Yuan was confused for a moment. "Oh. Don't you want to know everything you say? That's why I took it back from Mr. Ju." Shen Mingnan couldn't help but squeeze the mutton fat jade with more force. He took a deep breath and asked, "How much did you get for pawning it?" 300 taels. Shen Mingnan. "Great, I paid for her engagement token. It's a huge loss." Shen Mingnan looked at the window expressionlessly and said, "Climb out." Yang Yuan scratched his head. "Yes. After you get out, notify them to withdraw the outside sentries." "Master, this is not good. What about your safety then?" Shen Mingnan was calm and composed. "I have my own plans." Yang Yuan took the order and left. Shen Mingnan rubbed the mutton fat jade, not knowing what he was thinking. There was a sudden knock on the door, and Shen Mingnan quickly put the mutton fat jade into his arms. The next second, a round head popped in. Her almond-shaped eyes kept blinking, with a flattering smile on her face. "Brother Shen, come out quickly, I made something delicious for you." It seemed as if Shen Mingnan had just gotten a good look at Zhao Huiwei's appearance at this moment. She was very thin and looked very small. She was wearing a light green cotton dress, had curved eyebrows, big almond-shaped eyes with upturned corners, and a sallow little face with no discernible color. And her hair is as dry as grass, making her look like a stunted child. Now she looked at him with an ingratiating smile. Shen Mingnan felt a little relieved. She had taken such good care of him, so why not give her some face? He responded softly, his every move exuding elegance and nobility. "Zhao Huiwei, why are you still pretending?" She touched her nose and dared not say a word. He was even very servile and arranged for him the best chair in the house. "Come, Brother Shen, sit here." After a pause, he said, "I wiped the stool for you 5 times. Shen Mingnan had a calm expression on his face and sat down leisurely. The dish in front of him was indeed delicious. Shen Mingnan raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at Zhao Huiwei again, trying to equate her with the bowl of porridge. Obviously, the overlap failed. Was this done by one person? If Zhao Huiwei knew, she would definitely answer loudly no. She was poor before, and now she is rich. There is still some difference in essence. Considering Shen Mingnan's health, Zhao Huiwei didn't make the meal very spicy. In addition to the nutritious bone soup, there are also several refreshing side dishes. In real life, although Zhao Huiwei is a lazy person who does nothing, she loves to eat. She has cooked everything edible, but she is lazy and only cooks it once every 1 or 2 months. Of course, salted fish have to live a life of having everything they want, and if they themselves have enough food and clothing, they would be bringing shame to the salted fish community. But in this situation, there is really no one else besides her to take care of Shen Mingnan. Zhao Huiwei put a piece of meat in Shen Mingnan's bowl and looked at him eagerly. "Brother Shen, try it." Shen Mingnan looked at her chopsticks, then looked at the meat in the bowl. He can't eat. So he politely took the meat away and said, "I don't like meat." All right, if you dislike her, then dislike her. Zhao Huiwei also tactfully stopped serving him food and instead took the meat he had picked out and put it in her own bowl, grinning, I just like eating meat. Shen Mingnan didn't say anything else. It was his upbringing not to talk while eating or sleeping. However, the dishes cooked by Zhao Huiwei tasted pretty good, so he reluctantly ate 2 bowls. Chapter 11 I promise not to disturb him. Zhao Huiwei was very full after the meal. She squinted her eyes in satisfaction and smiled at Shen Mingnan. Brother Shen, how do you think it tastes? Shen Mingnan acted like a young master from an aristocratic family and said calmly, it's okay. Okay? Zhao Huiwei was also satisfied, and to round it off, Shen Mingnan himself was also satisfied. Zhao Huiwei stood up and happily cleaned up the dishes. Brother Shen, if you are tired, go to bed and rest. I will boil some medicine for you. Shen Mingnan. What's wrong with this little country girl? She chased him to bed with just a few words. Is it a nuisance for him to sit here? Shen Mingnan lowered his eyelashes, hiding the cold light in his eyes. He was just waiting for her to come and beg him. So he stood up and left without saying a word. Looking at his back, Zhao Huiwei shuddered subconsciously, as if something big was about to happen. Zhao Huiwei sighed softly. Destroy it, I'm tired. He washed the dishes with a sad face, then sat at the door to bask in the sun, thinking about how to improve his favor. Judging from the situation in the past few days, her favorability in his heart is roughly negative. Hui, are you there? A clear voice was heard, and Zhao Huiwei could see the person clearly through the fence. It is a girl wearing rose-red clothes. By chance she also saw her through the fence. Zhao Huiwei. He saw it and asked if she was there. Could you please be more careful when chatting her up? Zhao Huiwei was speechless, but still went to open the gate. The visitor was the youngest daughter of the Luohor village chief, named Zhao Huihua, who just turned 17 this year. It is said that people have been looking for husbands for her in the past 2 years, but she rejected any of them until now, when she is preparing to meet the son of Mr. Zhang in the town. The news has been leaked, and people in the village now praise her as the young lady whenever they meet her. Zhao Huiwei wondered why this guy came to her instead of going home to meet her properly. And she really had little contact with Zhao Huihua. Sister Lotus, why are you here? Zhao Huihua was holding a basket with eggs in it. She looked a little worried. I just came to see you. Your engagement was cancelled yesterday. I was afraid you would be sad. Zhao Huiwei, thank you, she is not sad at all. But Zhao Huiwei still reached out to take the egg and said thank you obediently, thank you, Sister Huihua. Zhao Huihua was pretty, and as the youngest in the family she was spoiled and didn't have to work in the fields. Her skin was fairer than other girls of the same age, so she didn't look like a country girl at all. After accepting the gift from others, Zhao Huiwei politely invited the person in and poured a bowl of boiled water. Sister Lotus, just drink it. I don't have any tea leaves for making tea here. Zhao Huihua nodded to show her understanding. After all, Zhao Huiwei's family conditions were there. But she didn't come in for tea, but... Sister Huihui, I heard that you saved someone in the mountains. The topic changed so quickly that Zhao Huiwei didn't react for a moment. Yes. At this time, Zhao Huiwei saw Zhao Huihua's face slowly turning red as if she had seen a ghost. Her eyes glanced towards the inner room intentionally or unintentionally. I heard his last name is Shen, is that right? Zhao Huiwei nodded numbly. What could she not see? This little girl fell in love with the villain. It's terrible. Is this something that ordinary people like us can even dream of? Zhao Huiwei wanted to hold her shoulders and shake her hard to wake her up. Can I go in and see him? No. Zhao Huihua. Because Zhao Huiwei's answer was so decisive, Zhao Huihua was shocked for a moment. After realizing what was happening, his face flushed. Why? Zhao Huiwei was extremely heartbroken, and the way she looked at Zhao Huihua was as if she was looking at a lost girl. Why think about him when there are so many people to think about? His heart is so full of the heroine that he can't spare any space for others. But Zhao Huiwei couldn't say it clearly. She was now worried about her life, fearing that one day he would be unhappy and kill her with a knife. After thinking it over for a while, he slowly said, because Brother Shen is recovering from his injuries, he doesn't like others to disturb him. Zhao Huihua still persisted after hearing this. Sister Huihui, I'll just take a look. I promise I won't disturb him. Zhao Huiwei was firm. No. I won't allow it. Please, let's go, he will definitely hear us making such a loud noise. Zhao Huiwei couldn't even imagine what consequences she would face if she really let Zhao Huiwei in. Chapter 12. No, you can't see him. Just thinking about this made Zhao Huiwei feel a chill down her spine. She couldn't help but think of the original text. Although the villain at this moment has not yet completely turned evil, he is not a good person either. His path to evil was shaped step by step after Zhao Huiwei died and went to the capital in the original book. In the later period, he killed people like crazy and there was no humanity to speak of. At the end of the story, when Cheng Yu and Yao Nanjia were getting married, he walked alone with a sword, stepping through the sea of corpses and blood to come to Yao Nanjia. His handsome face reflected in the blood looked like a devil, which was chilling. He has handsome eyebrows and eyes, and there is pride in his brows. Just by standing there, their whole garden will be filled with spring. He stared at Yao Nanjia's face and whispered, "This is the last time." After saying this, he turned and left, rushed to the battlefield, and finally died in battle. Zhao Huiwei sighed in her heart, watching her beloved woman being with the hero, but in the end she became disheartened and chose to die on the battlefield. Tell me, how can you win the heart of such a devoted male second lead? Zhao Huiwei looked at Zhao Huiwei with a look of disapproval. However, Zhao Huiwei didn't think so. She remembered coming to watch the fun yesterday. Even though the man was wearing coarse cloth, he couldn't hide the elegance in his eyes and eyebrows. She had never seen such a handsome man before. At first sight, she fell for him and couldn't help herself. Zhao Huiwei's obstruction made her feel a thorn in her heart. She must have fallen in love with him, as she was engaged to Mr. Yang and was also entangled with Brother Shen. She had never seen anyone so shameless. Zhao Huiwei suppressed her dissatisfaction and her eyes turned red. I'm very worried about Brother Shen. Can you let me take a look? Zhao Huiwei's face was stunned. It had only been a short while and Brother Shen had already called her? Shen Mingnan is not someone they can afford to offend, so they don't want Zhao Huiwei's life to be in danger from this person inside. She had no choice but to act fierce and said, "No, you can't see him. Besides, Sister Lotus, I heard that the village chief is looking for a young man from Mr. Zhang's family in town. It's not a good time for you to meet a man other than you, right?" If she had not seen Shen Mingnan's handsome appearance, perhaps she would have reluctantly chosen the son of Mr. Zhang. But now, when Zhao Huiwei thought about that kind of man with greasy hair and powdered face, she felt extremely disdainful. Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei blushed with anger. She had realized that Zhao Huiwei wanted to monopolize Brother Shen's love. Otherwise, why would she save such a person and just keep him at home without saying anything? Zhao Huiwei felt that she had revealed the truth. She wanted to force her way in but was afraid of leaving a bad impression on Shen Mingnan, so she had to give up in disappointment. Before leaving, he left a vicious warning, "Zhao Huiwei, I won't let you succeed." No, what is she going to do has anything to do with success. The inner room door creaked open. Shen Mingnan came out coughing, his frail face full of guilt. "Benefactor, is it because of me that I made things difficult for you?" Zhao Huiwei. She is clearly a big-tailed wolf. Why is she set up as a weak and gentle person? You are addicted to acting with her, right? So life never stops, and acting never stops. Could Zhao Huiwei blame him? No. Not only did she have to pretend to comfort him, she also had to work hard to gain his favorability. So, Zhao Huiwei shook her head and comforted him. "Brother Shen, what are you talking about? From the day I rescued you, there is no question of whether it was difficult or not. Just rest assured and recover here. I won't let anyone bother you. Just tell me what you want to eat." Zhao Huiwei spoke so sincerely that she even believed it herself. The country should issue her a good person card. Without asking for anything in return, they provide food and drink, and even chat with you. Shen Mingnan nodded with satisfaction in his heart. He really didn't want too many people to know about his existence. Zhao Huiwei could save her from a lot of unnecessary trouble. Shen Mingnan's expression softened a little. "In that case, thank you very much, benefactor." Har har. Zhao Huiwei faked a smile. "You're welcome, just treat it as your own home." After sending Shen Mingnan into the room, Zhao Huiwei poured the decocted medicine into the bowl. "It's time to improve your favorability again." Zhao Huiwei carried the medicine and thoughtfully took some candied fruits she had brought into the inner room. Shen Mingnan held the book left by Mr. Zhao in his hand. After reading some of the insights in it, he had to admit that he was indeed a talented person. It's a pity that he died young. Brother Shen, come and take your medicine. The black medicinal juice exuded a strong bitter taste, and Shen Mingnan subconsciously resisted it. I feel much better now, so there's no need to bother, benefactor. Unexpectedly, Zhao Huiwei insisted on handing the medicine to him. No, you have to take medicine to get better quickly if you are injured. Are you afraid of the bitterness? Look, I brought you some candied fruit. Have a drink. Shen Mingnan. The preparations are quite thorough, shouldn't he say thank you? Chapter 13. It's my duty to take care of you. Zhao Huiwei, who had been helping Shen Mingnan drink his medicine, happily collected the bowl and left. She closed the door considerately for him and said, Brother Shen, please take a rest first. I will call you after dinner. Shen Mingnan had an expressionless face and was too lazy to even glance at her. Yang Yuan had already given him the pills, so he didn't have to drink them. In the past, he had kept the medicine that Zhao Huiwei had given him with excuses and poured it out after she left, but this time, Zhao Huiwei refused to leave. He said to wait until the medicine cooled down before drinking it, and she really waited here for a quarter of an hour. She had to watch him swallow it with all her might before she would stop. There was a bitter taste on the tip of his tongue, and Shen Mingnan was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. He looked with a gloomy face at the few candied fruits she had left on the low cabinet beside him. After hesitating for a few seconds, he reached out and took one to try. He would try one. If it didn't taste good, he would bury Zhao Huiwei in the back mountain tonight. A few minutes later, the candied fruits on the plate were all gone. Shen Mingnan snorted coldly. What could you eat with just a few of them? The sweetness of the candied fruit completely covered up the bitterness on the tip of his tongue, and his depressed mood was calmed down. Who would have thought that Shen Mingnan, who could stir up panic in the entire imperial city with just his hands, would be afraid of taking medicine? Laugh. Shen Mingnan supported his forehead with his hand, a hint of mockery on his lips. Zhao Huiwei looked at the sky. It was already the evening hour, so she could start preparing dinner. Zhao Huiwei went to the vegetable garden behind the yard and picked some cabbages. There is a vegetable patch behind the yard that was planted by the original owner. There is also a peach tree planted on the right side of the yard, which is lush and strong. Peaches are already growing on the tree. Zhao Huiwei spends a long time under the tree every day, waiting for the peaches to ripen so she can pick them and eat them. The firewood in the stove was burning very vigorously. After using it for a few days, Zhao Huiwei still couldn't get used to it. It was too choking. She quickly steamed the white rice and made an egg custard with the eggs that Zhao Huiwei had sent her at noon. Finally, she sprinkled a layer of chopped green onions on it, which made the dish smell fresh and fragrant. I heated up the bone soup I had at noon and stir-fried some Chinese cabbage. As soon as the dishes were served, Zhao Huiwei went to call Shen Mingnan. This time she deliberately placed a pair of serving chopsticks on the dishes to avoid causing unnecessary disgust. When Shen Mingnan arrived, Zhao Huiwei had already served his meal, and there was a bowl of delicious-looking egg custard on his table. Zhao Huiwei moved the egg custard in front of him and said with a grin, I made this especially for you. Hearing the word, especially, Shen Mingnan's gloomy mood improved a little. He snorted in his heart, you're sensible. But he said, don't bother me, benefactor. I'll just eat whatever I want. He. Of course, Zhao Huiwei would not take his casual words seriously and just thought he was talking nonsense. But he said politely, it's not a bother, it's my duty to take care of you. Shen Mingnan raised his eyebrows and raised the corners of his mouth slightly when he heard the words. He was obviously pleased by what Zhao Huiwei said. He moved the egg custard in front of Zhao Huiwei and said, I don't like eating eggs. You can eat it, benefactor. Zhao Huiwei. Then he started eating by himself. Because he used serving chopsticks, Shen Mingnan obviously ate a little more than he did at lunch. Zhao Huiwei glanced at him secretly, eating the tender egg custard in her mouth, and couldn't help complaining in her heart, what a fussy man. After dinner, Zhao Huiwei moved a stool for him to the door to enjoy the cool air and digest his food. I was going to boil water for a bath, and after thinking for a while, I walked to the door, looked at Shen Mingnan and asked, Brother Shen, do you want to take a bath? Zhao Huiwei asked seriously, but Shen Mingnan didn't think so. How could an unmarried girl openly ask other men whether they take a bath or not? Just as I was about to scold her, I heard her say, you still have wounds on your body. Why don't you not wash them first? I'll boil some hot water for you. Take off your clothes and wipe them off. Shen Mingnan. Looking at Zhao Huiwei's clear eyes, it seemed that his mind was abnormal, and he couldn't utter a word of scolding. Under Zhao Huiwei's increasingly puzzled gaze, he slowly uttered, "Okay." After getting the answer, Zhao Huiwei went in contentedly to boil water. Great. It's another day of successfully gaining favorability points. She has been so good to him, it would be unreasonable if he wasn't more or less touched. Chapter 14. Then I leave? In order to appear to give priority to her, she painfully gave him the first pot of bath water she had boiled. She even considerately adjusted the water temperature for him. Zhao Huiwei opened the shower room curtain and saw Shen Mingnan, who was forced to stand outside. She blinked her almond-shaped eyes and said seriously, "The water temperature has been adjusted. There is a set of clean clothes for you. They are my father's. You can wear them for now. I will buy you 2 new sets tomorrow." Shen Mingnan gritted his teeth and said, "I understand." Seeing his stiff appearance, Zhao Huiwei thought that he was unable to take a shower because of his wound, so she added considerately, "Call me if you need anything. I'm in the kitchen. Then take your time washing. I'm leaving first." Shen Mingnan. He took a deep breath and stepped into the bathroom. The structure of the bathroom is very simple, with just a bathtub and a 3-layer shelf next to it, with soap nuts on the top layer. The second layer is a set of clean clothes. The bathroom was filled with hot steam, and Shen Mingnan looked at the bathtub that was obviously Zhao Huiwei's private bathtub. My face felt hot from time to time. Does she even know what it means to avoid suspicion? Shen Mingnan really wanted to turn around and leave, but because of his injury, he hadn't taken a shower for several days and felt extremely uncomfortable. After struggling for a while, he finally succumbed to reality. Whatever happens, I can just talk to her next time. Shen Mingnan took off his clothes, revealing the bandages crisscrossed around his body. Some of the snow-white bandages had turned dark black due to being stained by blood. Every time he peeled off a layer, he saw a hideous wound, large and small, crisscrossing each other. There are new and old scars, and each scar has a story of its own, which Shen Mingnan will always remember. The new wound was slowly healing. He stepped into the bathtub and let the warm water soak his wound. The pain gave him pleasure. He sank slowly until he could no longer breathe through his mouth and nose. Only his long black hair was left tangled and fluttering in the water, and he was enjoying the feeling of suffocation of death. By the time Shen Mingnan finished washing, half an hour had passed. Zhao Huiwei almost fell asleep while waiting. It turns out that there were also exquisite pig boys in ancient times. Seeing Shen Mingnan striding towards her, Zhao Huiwei raised her hand to say hello. He glanced at the icy face with his sharp eyes, then decisively retracted his claws and huddled beside the stove like a quail, pretending to be an invisible person. She breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Shen Mingnan walking by with a cold look on his face. "Damn it! I was just taking a shower, why are you angry again? Could it be that the wound cracked due to washing?" Zhao Huiwei silently said she was guilty. Clean the bathroom before taking a comfortable bath. After washing, Zhao Huiwei was still thinking that Shen Mingnan might be hurt by the wound, so she took out the golden wound medicine she bought specially. It was time to increase his favorability score again. She happily rushed into the inner room with the medicine in her hand. "Brother Shen, I'll give it to you, Zhao Huiwei's joyful expression froze on her face. She saw Shen Mingnan sitting on the bed with his shirt off and bare-chested in the room. On his left was a pile of gauze and a medicine bottle. Because of this, Shen Mingnan stopped wrapping the wound with gauze. Zhao Huiwei watched him from beginning to end, and sighed in her heart, "Don't be fooled by her skinny and weak appearance, I didn't expect that there is so much underneath the clothes." Finally, his eyes were fixed below his waist. Shen Mingnan's hand holding the gauze suddenly tightened, and the veins on the back of his hand bulged, which made Zhao Huiwei feel a little scared. Did she even think that she might die if he punched her like that? But the problem now is that the pure and innocent villain's body has been seen naked by her. He wouldn't chop her off as a tribute to his chastity, would he? Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei cautiously took a step back, raised the medicine bottle in her hand, and said weakly without any confidence, "I said I'm here to deliver medicine, do you believe me?" Shen Mingnan was furious, staring at Zhao Huiwei fiercely, gritting his teeth and saying, "Zhao Huiwei, do you know what the difference between men and women is?" Zhao Huiwei swallowed her saliva. What a guy, he didn't even call me benefactor anymore. He was really angry. Do you have any shame? Zhao Huiwei. This behavior of a decent woman who looked like she was being teased made Zhao Huiwei, a woman herself, feel ashamed of herself. But she really didn't dare to challenge him head on. Zhao Huiwei, who was afraid of being implicated by the villain's rage, opened and closed her mouth and finally uttered 3 words. Then I'll leave. Chapter 15. How about I help you choose? The scene was silent for about 3 seconds, broken by Shen Mingnan's laughter. With just this sound, Zhao Huiwei felt her hair stand on end, as if hundreds of ghosts were passing by, eerie and terrifying. She even felt his murderous intent. Zhao Huiwei. She was careless, she shouldn't have come. Just when Zhao Huiwei was considering whether to run or not, he said, "Come here. Dame, dame. Give me medicine." Zhao Huiwei hesitated. Just when she was still considering whether to go or not, Shen Mingnan spoke again, "Why don't you come over?" There was a strong threat in the tone. Zhao Huiwei sniffed, blinked her watery almond eyes, and whispered an opinion, "You can come over, but you can't hit me. Don't make me say it a second time." Zhao Huiwei was almost crying. She walked carefully in front of Shen Mingnan, her dark peach eyes filled with anger. Zhao Huiwei took the medicine bottle, and when she got closer she found that his body was covered with many scars. Her heart trembled, and she remembered that he was not only the prince of a wealthy family, but also a general who fought bravely to defend his country. Zhao Huiwei was so scared that she didn't dare to communicate much with Shen Mingnan. She carefully applied the medicine powder and then started to bandage his wound with gauze. The one at the back could be entangled, but the one at the front. Zhao Huiwei gritted her teeth and half-hugged him. After all this entanglement, sweat was pouring down the tip of her nose. She was so tired. The girl's body temperature continued to flow from behind him, and a faint, fresh fragrance lingered around his nose, but Shen Mingnan found that the smell was surprisingly not unpleasant. After finally wrapping it up, she just wanted to leave this evil spirit's room as soon as possible. "The wounds have been bandaged." Shen Mingnan hummed, "Yeah." Zhao Huiwei breathed a sigh of relief, but when she turned around to leave, Shen Mingnan suddenly hugged her around the waist. She was so dizzy from the fall that before she could say anything, an arrow pierced straight into the bedpost with a swoosh. And that position was exactly where Zhao Huiwei was standing. Bang! The door was kicked open and 4 or 5 men in black rushed in, each holding a knife in their hands. They saw Shen Mingnan's position and rushed straight towards him. There was another bang sound. Zhao Huiwei looked in surprise and saw that the small window had opened a big hole and 4 or 5 people rushed in from outside. "Zhao Huiwei, it never ends, right?" Zhao Huiwei huddled in Shen Mingnan's arms. No matter how he pulled her, she held onto his clothes tightly and refused to let go. "What a joke, let go. I won't let go even if you kill me." Shen Mingnan was so angry that he laughed. Seeing how shameless this person was, he was helpless against her for a moment. His gaze could only turn to the battle situation, his eyes were cold and full of disdain. Shen Mingnan's attitude completely angered the 5 brothers in black. "Shen thief, die. You think you can hurt my master? Give me your life." The sound of swords clashing spread quickly throughout the room. Zhao Huiwei knew how fierce the fight was without even watching. Fortunately, she lives in a remote place, otherwise the noise would have scared the villagers in Luohua village half to death. Puff, puff. The sound of swords entering the body continued, but after a quarter of an hour the room became quiet again. "Master, we left one alive." When Yang Yuan's voice sounded, Zhao Huiwei knew it was over. Without Shen Mingnan saying anything, she moved aside consciously, but glanced at the scene secretly. Yang Yuan was also injured, with blood stains on his sleeves. 4 of the 5 men in black were dead, and the remaining one had his jaw dislocated, staring at Shen Mingnan with hatred. Zhao Huiwei felt very uncomfortable. This was a huge shock for her who grew up under the national flag. She suppressed her nausea and huddled beside the bed, not daring to make a sound. Shen Mingnan put on his clothes slowly and then cast a condescending look at the man in black kneeling on the ground. "Who sent you?" The man in black laughed when he heard that, and blood foam slid down the corners of his mouth onto the ground, staining the area bright red. Shen Mingnan chuckled, his dark eyes dark. "I know even if you don't tell me, it's Crown Prince Cheng Yu." The man in black's eyes widened instantly and a ho-ho sound came out of his mouth. "Don't be so quick to deny it." Shen Mingnan stood up and squatted in front of him. His slender white hands grabbed his throat, and he slowly lifted him up with one hand before slowly saying, "You should think about how you want to die first." Seeing that the man in black was speechless after his jaw was removed, Shen Mingnan kindly said, "How about I help you choose?" Chapter 16, Thoughts Sent to the Moon. Click. There was a sound of a neck breaking, and the man in black soon died. His neck hung limply. Shen Mingnan let go and the body fell to the ground like a boneless corpse. He took the handkerchief handed to him by Yang Yuan and wiped his fingers carefully one by one. Then he turned his gaze to Zhao Huiwei, who was shaking like a sieve on the bed, and smiled maliciously. "My benefactor, it's my turn to save you this time. Look, everyone who wanted to hurt you is dead, so benefactor, don't be afraid." Is she afraid of the man in black? She is obviously afraid of him. He cruelly broke the man's neck in front of her, forcing her to watch their death with evil taste. Zhao Huiwei's face turned pale and she was speechless. "My benefactor, don't you have anything to say to me?" When the word benefactor came out of his mouth again, it sounded like a ghost from the underworld coming to claim his life. Zhao Huiwei tried to force herself to laugh but couldn't. In the end, she uttered two words stupidly, "Thank you." Shen Mingnan was stunned, then suddenly burst into laughter. He hooked Zhao Huiwei's chin with his white fingers, forcing her to look into his eyes, but there was no smile in his tone. "My benefactor is so funny, I don't want you to die." Zhao Huiwei was shocked. She had done so much, but she still couldn't escape death. As if he knew what Zhao Huiwei was thinking, Shen Mingnan immediately said, "Don't worry, benefactor, I won't let you die. My life is temporarily saved. Today's incident has frightened my benefactor again. I have to confess something." Zhao Huiwei widened her eyes. Here it comes, it's time to show her ID card." Sure enough, the next second Shen Mingnan said, "I am Shen Mingnan, the prince of the Shen Guogong mansion in the capital. I was hunted by my enemies and ended up here. Fortunately, I was rescued by my benefactor." Although Zhao Huiwei already knew his identity, she still had to pretend to be shocked at this moment. There were 3 parts of shock, 3 parts of panic, 3 parts of helplessness, and 1 part of fear in her eyes. A perfect pie chart was divided into exact pieces by her. Zhao Huiwei quickly climbed up from the bed and knelt on the ground with a plop. "Shindiye. Oh, no, please forgive me, master. I have offended you in the past few days. I hope you can forgive me." Hearing the respect unconsciously added to Zhao Huiwei's tone, even stopping calling him brother Shen Mingnan sneered in his heart. He was very satisfied with this result. It was true that releasing one's true nature would make one happy. I hope Zhao Huiwei won't dare to act rashly in front of him again. Looking past Zhao Huiwei, Shen Mingnan lazily lay on the bed. "My benefactor, please don't kneel down. I still need you to take care of my injuries." Zhao Huiwei stood up speechlessly, a smile forming on the corner of her mouth. "It's my duty to take care of you. Don't worry, benefactor. I will definitely reward you handsomely once my injuries are healed." Hearing this, Zhao Huiwei instantly perked up. Was it the 5,000 taels for her remarried mother? She didn't know where the current plot was heading, but who cares? Zhao Huiwei is not dead now, the 5,000 taels can only be hers. Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei's fear faded a little. With these 5,000 taels, it was enough for her to live a lazy life in Luohua village for the rest of her life, so she had to take good care of Shen Mingnan until he recovered from his injury and left here. Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei instantly felt much more relaxed physically and mentally, and her tone became much more cheerful. "Sir, it's getting late, you should go to bed early." After saying that, he turned around and walked out of the inner room. As soon as he stepped over the threshold, he heard Shen Mingnan's faint voice, "Yang Yuan, go and throw these bodies to the back mountain to feed the wolves." After experiencing such a thrilling night, Zhao Huiwei felt limp when she returned to the east wing. Lying on the bed with lifeless eyes, "I missed my home more and more." She missed the delicious meals her mother cooked. Every time she called her to eat, she would stare at her and deliberately scold her. "You are always slow in doing other things, but you are the most active when it comes to eating." Zhao Huiwei always smiles and says, "My mom's cooking is the best. I love her so much." HMPH, smooth talk. "And my dad would be sour at this time. Why do you love your mom? What about me? Love, love, love. Is that enough?" The happy scene of the family of 3 seemed to be just yesterday. A breeze blew in gently, and Zhao Huiwei felt a coolness on her face. The edge of the pillow was already wet, and she lifted the quilt to cover her face so that she didn't cry. She just sent her thoughts to the moon, and the moon helped to send them to faraway places. Chapter 17. She Likes Me. In the morning, Zhao Huiwei got up at dawn. She walked into the yard and felt the scent of grass in the wind. Zhao Huiwei's home is very clean. Unlike other farmers, she does not raise livestock. Instead, her yard is filled with various wild flowers transplanted from the mountains, and there is a lush peach tree. The fence wall is covered with green vines and pink and white wild roses in full bloom, which is a beautiful sight. Zhao Huiwei admired it for a moment and then went to fetch water from a well on the left and went back to the kitchen to boil water for washing. She made very little noise for fear of disturbing the evil spirit in the inner room. After washing up, she left a cup of hot water for Shen Mingnan before starting to make breakfast. The dough was risen when she just got up, and she kneaded it into various cute little animals in her hands. I hope the villain can look at more beautiful and lovely things to purify his violent heart. After steaming the buns, I cooked some sweet potato porridge and added a plate of slightly spicy pickled radish. Zhao Huiwei wanted to eat first, but she didn't dare to do so now. She slowly walked to the door of the inner room, raised her hand and knocked lightly, and said crisply, "Master, are you awake?" After a long while, a low and hoarse voice came from inside, "Hum. Breakfast is ready, please come and have some." After he finished speaking, there was silence inside and Zhao Huiwei left. As she walked, she shed tears for herself, and she felt more and more like a maid taking care of Shen Mingnan's daily life. Not long after, the door to the inner room opened. Shen Mingnan was wearing the blue shirt that Zhao Huiwei had prepared for him last night, and his long black hair was simply tied up with a jade hairpin. There was a hazy drowsiness between her beautiful eyebrows, as if she was a mountain fairy who had just woken up. His pair of sparkling peach blossom eyes seemed to pass over Zhao Huiwei, with a hint of subtle mockery. "Did you sleep well last night, benefactor? Damn, you are really bringing up something that is not relevant. How come she has such a beautiful face but no mouth that can speak human language?" She twitched the corners of her mouth and laughed, "Thanks to you, it's okay." Shen Mingnan chuckled, "That's good." I served him a bowl of porridge and some hot steamed buns. Shen Mingnan saw the strange shape of the steamed bun and asked with interest, "What is this?" Zhao Huiwei raised her head and took a quick look. "What you have is just a rabbit. Look, there are puppies, kittens and tigers here. How about that? Aren't they cute?" Zhao Huiwei was quite pleased with herself as this was the result of her whole morning's work. She took a kitten-shaped bun and took a bite. It was so sweet and delicious that she couldn't help but squint her eyes. "TSK, it's just a child's trick." He looked at the white and tender rabbit bun and bit off half of its head with just one bite. After breakfast, Shen Mingnan went into the house without hesitation. Zhao Huiwei even wondered if there was any treasure in the house. After washing the dishes, she began to boil medicine for him, but in her heart she was thinking about whether she should go to town later to buy a few chickens to nourish him. Not knowing when the knife wound would heal, she poured the boiled medicine into a bowl for him dejectedly, and waited until the medicine cooled down a little before she brought it to him. Knock, knock. She knocked twice and only entered with the bowl after hearing the sound from inside. Shen Mingnan leaned lazily against the head of the bed, reading a letter in his hand. It was not until he smelled a faint scent of medicine that he raised his head in confusion. Zhao Huiwei blinked her clear eyes and said, "Master, it's time to take the medicine." Shen Mingnan, it was quite sudden. Same taste, same dark color, Shen Mingnan could vomit out the breakfast he had just eaten with just one look. Did this little village girl do this on purpose? She knew he didn't like the medicine but still brought it to him. So he said with a dark face, "Put it down. When it cools down, I will." "Sir, I waited until the medicine was cold before bringing it here. If you don't believe me, just look, it's not hot at all. She is so considerate and takes care of me from all angles. Be touched, villain." "Shen Mingnan, thank you so much." Shen Mingnan decided to show some deterrence. His dark eyes darkened slightly, and he said in a dignified manner without being angry, "Take it away. I won't drink it." Zhao Huiwei was really scared by him. Just thinking about this man dragging his illness on and refusing to get better, what would she do if he stayed in her house for a year or two? Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei's face turned pale with fright. Shen Mingnan snorted in his heart, and his mood gradually improved as he watched Zhao Huiwei's face gradually turn pale. "I thought that after being scared by him like this, Zhao Huiwei would leave with the medicine, but who would have thought that she would go one step further? Sir, please don't be willful. Only by drinking the medicine can your body get better quickly. Zhao Huiwei's words were so sincere and heartfelt, as if she was really thinking about him. Her pair of almond-shaped eyes looked at him earnestly, and Shen Mingnan could see from them that she sincerely hoped that he would get better soon, without any hypocrisy. For a moment, he felt an indescribable sense of weirdness in his heart. Why could she still be so sincere to him even though his attitude towards her was so bad? She was different from the noble ladies in the capital. She was as thin as a kitten, but her eyes were round and bright, full of vitality, as clear as a spring. Shen Mingnan had a vague guess in his mind. Could it be that she likes me? Chapter 18. Sir, are you afraid of suffering? Shen Mingnan looked at her critically, and a hint of disgust flashed across his face. Zhao Huiwei, who was waiting for Shen Mingnan to drink the medicine and get the bowl, said. No, she was just standing in front of him and was still disliked. Resisting the urge to roll her eyes, Zhao Huiwei patiently urged him to drink the medicine. Sir, are you afraid of the bitterness? I prepared your favorite preserves for you. Upon hearing this, Shen Mingnan instantly became like a cat with its fur standing on end. He frowned and said in a cold voice, who was afraid of suffering. Having said that, he drank the medicine in one breath and stuffed the bowl into Zhao Huiwei's arms. With an unhappy look on his face, he continued, who likes to eat candied fruit? Zhao Huiwei touched her nose speechlessly. Why was he so fierce? In order to prevent him from getting angry and attacking people, Zhao Huiwei showed a flattering smile and coaxed him. It's not that you like to eat it, it's that I like to eat it. Shen Mingnan raised his eyes to look at her, and saw that she was smiling brightly with her eyebrows and eyes curved. With a curl of his lips, he continued to say disdainfully, stop laughing, it's really ugly. Zhao Huiwei was full of questions. Can we still have a good chat? This guy is definitely sick. So he took the bowl and walked out expressionlessly. Oh, why are you angry after just a few words? Give him the cold shoulder. Shen Mingnan was in a bad mood and was about to say something to Zhao Huiwei when he saw her come in. Sir, could you please stand up for a moment? I'll measure your size and then go to town to buy clothes for you. Zhao Huiwei held a ruler in her hand and looked at him with wet cat eyes. Shen Mingnan's dark face finally improved, and he hummed coldly with the look of a great master. Zhao Huiwei tightened her grip on the ruler, wishing she could throw it in his face, and made a quick calculation of the gap between the enemy and us. She endured it. Shen Mingnan was very tall. Zhao Huiwei estimated that he was about 1.85 meters tall, with broad shoulders, narrow waist and long legs, which was a perfect body proportion. She was only just up to his shoulder, and when she raised her head she could meet his slightly disdainful gaze. The attack power is not high, but the insult is extremely strong. It's not her fault that she is not tall. Zhao Huiwei had some difficulty measuring, and she memoized the width roughly as measured by hand and with a ruler. After all the operations, sweat broke out on Zhao Huiwei's forehead. She wiped it casually with her sleeve, and said with a red face and a smile, Sir, I have measured it. What color clothes do you want? He paused and added, I think you look good in blue. Shen Mingnan's eyes fell on her serious little face, and the corners of his mouth curled slightly. Really? Zhao Huiwei nodded. He sneered, but I want black. As long as you are happy. When we went to the east of the village, there were already several aunts from the village in old Liu's car. Hey, Huihui is going to town. The person who spoke was Chen Duan, the daughter-in-law of Chen Fugui. Zhao Huiwei greeted her politely, well, hello, Aunt Duan. Then he looked at the people sitting next to her and said, hello, aunties. Zhao Huiwei greeted them one by one before getting on the ox cart. Then she unexpectedly discovered that Zhao Huihua was also in the car, staring at her with a bad look. What a sin, it's all Shen Mingnan's fault. After Zhao Huiwei got in the car, she sat quietly. Old Liu saw that it was almost time, so he drove off. The shaking along their way was so painful that Zhao Huiwei was really tortured by the ox cart. Zhao Huiwei. A muffled voice, made of gritted teeth, came from behind him. Zhao Huiwei turned to look at Zhao Huihua in confusion. What? Just wait for me. Just then the ox cart arrived at the town, and Zhao Huihua jumped off the cart and left without looking back. Strange things happen every year, but this year there are especially many. There are 2 clothing shops in Xinglin town. The one Zhao Huiwei first entered is called Xiuhua Pavilion. The colorful fabrics in the shop are dazzling. The proprietress was a slightly plump woman who looked to be in her 30s and looked very kind. When she saw Zhao Huiwei coming in, she smiled and said, "Young lady, are you buying some clothes?" "I'm not exaggerating, but my family has the most complete range of fabrics in the entire Xinglin town. It's quite neat, but she just doesn't know how to do it." She herself didn't know how to do it, and she didn't even touch a needle when searching her original body's memory. "I buy men's ready to wear." The plump woman smiled and led Zhao Huiwei to the inner left side of the store, where most men's clothes were hung. Zhao Huiwei took a look and saw that they were all made of linen or cotton. Shen Mingnan, the fussy man who was thinking about buying this kind of cloth, would probably not be satisfied. He touched the silver against his chest and gritted his teeth and said, "Boss, is there anything better?" The slightly plump woman was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "My husband's surname is Cow, you can just call me Madam Cow." "Are you going to buy clothes for your husband?" Chapter 19. I bought it for my dad. Husband. Zhao Huiwei's face turned red with fright at Madam Cow's voice. How could she dare to take advantage of that evil spirit? So he quickly waved his hands and said, No, I bought it for my dad." Madam Cow was stunned, but seeing Zhao Huiwei's serious expression, she believed it and smiled to smooth things over. "Then I misunderstood. The young lady is really filial." Zhao Huiwei chuckled twice without saying anything, then followed Madam Cow upstairs. "Female, feel free to look around. The best clothes in our store are all here." Zhao Huiwei looked around and immediately fell in love with the wide-sleeved black coat in the middle. I was even more amazed when I got closer. The collar and cuffs were embroidered with cloud patterns in gold thread, making the whole thing look luxurious and grand. Zhao Huiwei touched it and found the fabric was still smooth. "Oh, young lady, you have a good eye. This is the treasure of our store. It is made of silk shipped from Jiangnan. Look at the cloud pattern, it is made of Suzhou embroidery. The embroidery is exquisite, just like the real thing." Zhao Huiwei got straight to the point. "How much?" "Oh." Madam Cow paused. 20 taels. "I'm sorry, I don't deserve it. Turn around and leave without hesitation." Hey, don't be in a hurry to leave, little lady. This dress is the most suitable to be taken back to honor your father." Madam Cow looked at the clothes, then at Zhao Huiwei, gritted her teeth and said painfully, "If you really want it, I'll give you less." Zhao Huiwei looked dead. "How much can I give up?" "At least 2 taels. You can tell from the quality of my clothes that you won't get any loss if you buy them. Your father would even show off to others that his daughter is so filial when he wears them." "Okay, stop talking, doesn't he know how to do that? Let me think about it." Madam Cow was not in a hurry either, she would just occasionally offer a few suggestions so as not to make the atmosphere awkward. Zhao Huiwei reached out and touched the warm banknotes, closed her eyes and said with a pained look, "Take it." Madam Cow was overjoyed. "Okay." This set of clothes could not be sold because of its good quality and high price. Finally, someone who knew the value of it bought it. Mrs. Cow was afraid that she would regret it, so she packed the clothes very quickly. Zhao Huiwei went shopping again and bought him a better black silk robe, and 2 sets of inner clothes, which cost her 21 taels in the end. Before leaving, she looked up at the women's clothing hanging on the first floor. A soft pink dress instantly caught her eye. The light pink cotton short jacket, with peach blossoms embroidered on the collar and cuffs, paired with a light green pleated skirt, is eye-catching no matter how you look at it, and Zhao Huiwei fell in love with it at first sight. So she grabbed Madam Cow and pointed at the pink dress. "Let's make a deal, give me one." Madam Cow. From your attitude, you don't seem to be willing to discuss it. But it was a cotton one, so Madam Cow gritted her teeth and gave it to Zhao Huiwei. While wrapping it, she kept saying to her, "My dear, I'm giving this to you at a loss. You must come back to patronize my business next time." Zhao Huiwei nodded, her heart bleeding. There really was a spendthrift man in her family. "Go slowly, little lady." After leaving the clothing store, Zhao Huiwei walked towards East City. That place sells poultry and livestock, and she also wants to buy 2 chickens for Shinmingnan. People were coming and going on the street. Zhao Huiwei was carrying 2 chickens she bought in Dongcheng in a basket on her back and holding the clothes she bought for Shinmingnan in her hands. She was afraid of getting them dirty, so she held them tightly all the way. Selling candied haws. Delicious candied haws. There were sounds of people hawking candied haws on the roadside. Zhao Huiwei stopped to look and saw the bright red and crispy candid whores. Zhao Huiwei immediately started drooling. She can make candid whores. He walked to the stall excitedly, took out 2 cents and bought 2 strings. He ate 1 string for himself and left 1 string for Shen Mingnan. Gee. Just as Zhao Huiwei took the candid whores, a fast-running horse jumped out from the Bluestone Road not far away. He just ran past Zhao Huiwei, and she was so startled that the candid whores she had just picked up fell to the ground, and her mouth was full of dust. Zhao Huiwei raised her head angrily, and saw a man in black tights riding past on his horse. His hair was tied tightly on top of his head. He turned his head to the side with a sharp look in his eyes, a hint of apology flashed across his eyes, and then he rode away again. Fuck. Don't run if you have the guts. However, Ma Ying had already disappeared. Zhao Huiwei looked down at the candid whores on the ground that were already covered in ash. They were no longer edible, so she took out her money and bought 2 more strings in frustration. Don't let her meet such a person with no manners again. Otherwise, she will definitely teach him a lesson. Chapter 20. Why is my benefactor so nice to me? Zhao Huiwei bought a few snacks and went to the town entrance at noon to ride old Liu's ox cart back home. On their way back, I didn't meet Zhao Huiwei. I staggered all the way to the door of my house. Zhao Huiwei paid the fare and pushed open the gate and walked in. Zhao Huiwei took out the things from the backpack, found a bamboo basket to cover the hen in it, and went into the main room with snacks and candid whores. Sir. Zhao Huiwei called out, but no one answered. She knocked on the door of the inner room with a hint of doubt. Sir. Just as he was about to push the door open, he lazily leaned against the door of the west wing and said, Here it is. Zhao Huiwei looked up and saw that he looked nonchalant with a slight smile on his lips. Zhao Huiwei raised the snack in her hand and smiled. Sir, look, I brought you some delicious chestnut cakes. Then he took out a candid whores as if offering a treasure, and another sour and sweet candid whores. There was a thin layer of sweat on the girl's forehead, her face was red, and her eyes were bright. Shen Mingnan saw his own shadow in her clear pupils. He looked at her with amusement. Why is my benefactor so kind to me? Hearing this, Zhao Huiwei narrowed her eyes slightly. It was time to increase her favorability score again. Zhao Huiwei opened her mouth and said, Don't think too much, sir, because you also saved my life. I am grateful. I don't know how to repay you. I can only buy you delicious food. I know that you are different from ordinary people like us. You have great ambitions and things that need to be done. You can't stay in Luohua village forever. If possible, I hope your injuries can heal immediately. After he finished speaking, Shen Mingnan stared at Zhao Huiwei for a few seconds, and all he saw was sincerity. He smiled gently, his black eyes slightly curved, and at this moment Zhao Huiwei felt that he was like a young man in his youth. Yeah. Zhao Huiwei nodded. Unfortunately, there are no gods in the world, and my injuries cannot be healed immediately. And thank you for your kindness, I don't like snacks. After saying that, he walked past Zhao Huiwei and went back into the inner room. Zhao Huiwei, who failed to gain favor. What does this person look like? Why is he so stubborn? He is indeed the cold-hearted and murderous villain in the book. I guess only his white moonlight heroine can move his cold heart. Zhao Huiwei didn't expect to increase his favorability in just a few tries, so she took her time in everything she did. She would take good care of him during this time and let him penetrate her bit by bit. When he recovers from his injury and goes to the capital to kill everyone, it will be time for her to retire. Then Shen Mingnan gave her a few thousand or tens of thousands of taels because he had taken good care of her, and she didn't mind. After receiving her pension, she lived a leisurely life in Luohua village, rented a few hundred acres of land to become a landlord, and found a handsome son-in-law to live with her. Just thinking about this gives me a lot of motivation. She went to pick up the clothes she bought, knocked on the door and went in. Sir, I bought you clothes. Shen Mingnan didn't even raise his eyes. Just leave it there. After putting it down, Zhao Huiwei walked out and caught a glimpse of the open door of the west wing out of the corner of her eye. She hadn't taken a good look at the house since she came here. In her original memory, besides the inner room where she slept, there were 2 side rooms, which were quite large. The east wing is the guest room, and the west wing is the study of the original body's father. She has never been in there since she came. Zhao Huiwei pushed the door of the west wing a little further. The structure inside was almost the same size as the east wing. There was a simple desk and a chair with an armchair in the room. There were 2 bookshelves on the side, which were filled with books. Zhao Huiwei had piled up some miscellaneous items in other corners of the room. Zhao Huiwei stepped forward, picked up a book, and found that there was no dust on the book, which showed that the original owner cleaned it regularly. She opened the Analects of Confucius and found some annotations in elegant handwriting, which were left by her original father. Books are very valuable in this era, and even if the original owner was poor and miserable, he never thought of selling them. She suddenly felt a subtle feeling in her heart, and her heart was filled with longing that was about to overflow. Zhao Huiwei put her hand on her chest. So is this the original body's emotion? A vague image of the happy childhood of Zhao Huiwei and her father Zhao Rongyi emerged in my mind. The father and daughter snuggled together under the peach tree, reading and laughing, as if Zhao Huiwei had experienced it herself. When I came to my senses again, I was crying unconsciously. Chapter 21. After all, it was my benefactor who gave me this gift. In a room. After Zhao Huiwei left, Shen Mingnan stood up and walked to the clothes. He picked up the top piece, which was silky smooth to the touch. Although it was not as good as what he wore in Beijing, it was still acceptable. He still didn't understand what Zhao Huiwei wanted. He didn't believe that anyone would treat another person sincerely. Anyone who did so would have other intentions. Was he guessing what Zhao Huiwei wanted, or was he greedily wanting to take her to the capital to enjoy power and wealth after he recovered from his injuries? Or do you want to gain a reputation by your side? Knock, knock. There was a knock on the window. Shen Mingnan looked up and saw that the broken and shaky window was lifted up, and a head popped out from it. Yang Yuan showed his big white teeth. Master. He looks so disgusting no matter how you look at him, like a pervert climbing up his window every day. Shen Mingnan pinched his brows with a headache. Come in. When Yang Yuan came in, he was careful about the strength he used, fearing that the window would be completely gone. Miss Zhao went to town today and did nothing else except buy clothes. As he said this, he looked at the clothes in Shen Mingnan's hand and said in surprise, "It's the one in your hand." She picked it very carefully. Shen Mingnan lowered his eyes, as if he was pleased, and his tone contained a hint of smile. Really? But Yang Yuan was a little confused. How come the clothes were in his master's hands? Shen Mingnan raised his eyebrows and motioned for him to continue. But what? Yang Yuan licked his dry lips and said, "But Miss Zhao said that the clothes were bought for her father, so how could they be in your?" As he spoke, Yang Yuan's voice gradually weakened, and he was forced to swallow the last 2 words he wanted to say, "in my hand," and he dared not say them. Shen Mingnan, who was forced to become a father. The house was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop, and things were gradually getting weird. Yang Yuan raised his head cautiously and glanced at his master's expression. Shen Mingnan had a blank expression on his face, his eyes fixed on his clothes, and no one knew what he was thinking. Heh! A sneer sounded as Yang Yuan expected. She is so beautiful. After a long pause, Shen Mingnan gritted his teeth and uttered, "I can't give birth to a daughter as ugly as her." Yang Yuan. Zhao Huiwei had no idea what happened in the inner room. She is now diligently cleaning the study of her late father. After all, she is occupying the body of someone else's daughter, so it is her responsibility to fulfill her obligations. An hour had passed since she finished cleaning, and then she suddenly remembered that she hadn't tea cooked for Shen Mingnan yet. She hurried out of the west wing, and then found that the door of the inner room was unexpectedly not closed. Zhao Huiwei walked in directly and saw Shen Mingnan, who had changed into black clothes, lying on the bed. Shen Mingnan, dressed in black, inexplicably gave off an abstinent vibe. He looked both noble and cool, with a look of dignity in his eyes that made people dare not look directly at him. At this moment, he was supporting his head with one hand and holding a scroll with the other. The sleeves slid down, revealing his white elbows. His collar was slightly open and Zhao Huiwei caught a glimpse of his faintly visible collarbone. Her black hair was half tied up and half loose, and her sparkling peach blossom eyes were cold as she looked at Zhao Huiwei. Zhao Huiwei was stunned. The only abstinence male godlike Shen Mingnan was this one. She quickly came back to her senses. With a smile on her face, she glanced at the black clothes he was wearing, and asked indirectly, "Sir, do you like this suit?" Shen Mingnan paused after hearing this, then placed the book in his hand on the bed, looked at Zhao Huiwei lazily, and smiled a little strangely. "It's not bad, after all, it's a gift from my benefactor." Zhao Huiwei. She couldn't tell what was strange for a moment. I could only scratch my head and reply awkwardly, as long as you like it. HMPH. Shen Mingnan looked coldly and snorted. Zhao Huiwei was already accustomed to his weird look. Alas, men's hearts are like needles in the sea. This made it impossible for Zhao Huiwei, who wanted to improve her favorability, to start. This question suddenly caused the conversation to fall into a lull. In order to avoid embarrassment for both parties, Zhao Huiwei started to change the topic. Sir, are you hungry? Shen Mingnan raised his eyelids slightly. What do you think? Got it, she'll go cook now. Zhao Huiwei felt bitter. She called him benefactor every day, but he never did anything to repay her. He also got angry for no reason every day and treated her like a maid. Zhao Huiwei, who didn't dare to resist, went into the kitchen cursing again. Chapter 22. Zhao Huiwei, are you ordering me? It was already 3 p.m. when they finished their meal. Just as Zhao Huiwei was preparing to boil medicine for Shen Mingnan, a voice calling came from outside the yard. Sister Huihui, are you home? Out of curiosity, Zhao Huiwei stretched her head to take a look. Then she saw Zhao Huiwei again. Zhao Huiwei also saw Zhao Huiwei through the fence, waved at her and smiled kindly. It seemed like the two were good friends, but Zhao Huiwei's memory was not as bad as hers. She had not forgotten the harsh words Zhao Huiwei had said to her. She kept waving, and Zhao Huiwei went to open the gate for her without saying a word. She was wearing a light green cross-collared short jacket and an apricot-colored skirt embroidered with lotus flowers. Her hair was combed into a bun with a parting, dotted with pearl flowers, and her face was lightly made up, giving her the look of a beautiful girl next door. The drunkard's real interest is not in drinking. She crossed her arms and asked, "What are you doing here, Sister Lotus?" Zhao Huiwei's face flushed slightly. Sister Huihui, I'm here to bring you some wild vegetables. This made Zhao Huiwei think of the eggs she gave her last time, so she slammed the door shut and Zhao Huiwei's face turned dark. Just when she was about to knock on the door again, the door opened the next second. Zhao Huiwei was holding a bag of chestnut cakes in her hand, which she stuffed into Zhao Huiwei's basket. Sister Lotus gave me some eggs last time. This is my thank you gift to you. Zhao Huiwei? That egg was clearly given by her to Brother Shen to eat. Judging from Zhao Huiwei's tone, all the eggs had gone into her stomach. Brother Shen was already injured, and Zhao Huiwei snatched away his eggs, which were meant to nourish his body. Everyone said that Zhao Huiwei was kind-hearted, but she felt that was not the case at all and that this woman was just pretending. Zhao Huiwei saw that she was silent, wondering what she was thinking about. She had no idea that Zhao Huiwei had already imagined Shen Mingnan's miserable end, being abused and having no one to turn to for help. How miserable! When Zhao Huiwei thought of this, her eyes turned red and she looked weak. Sister Huihui, please don't mind what I said last time. I didn't mean it. I'm here to apologize to you. Please accept this wild vegetable. When Zhao Huiwei was moved, she involuntarily held Zhao Huiwei's hands, handed the wild vegetables to her, turned around and ran away. Zhao Huiwei was stunned. The wild vegetables in her hands were a little hot. After chasing for a few steps, I found that the person had disappeared. My goodness, we got free eggs and free wild vegetables, but we didn't even give away the chestnut cake as a thank you gift. This. She decided to find an opportunity to return it tomorrow. It didn't seem right to keep accepting other people's things. Putting the wild vegetables in the corner of the kitchen, she opened a bag of chestnut cake and ate it while decocting medicine for Shen Mingnan. She also took out the candied horse she bought in the morning. After leaving them out for the whole morning, the sugar had melted a little, but this did not prevent Zhao Huiwei from enjoying the sweet and sour candied horse. After finishing one skewer, she couldn't eat another one because it would make her teeth sour. But it would be such a waste not to eat it, so Zhao Huiwei was a little conflicted. Looking at the medicine that was almost ready, she took out a bowl, put the candied horse on a stick in the bowl with chopsticks, and sprinkled a layer of white sugar on it. It looked white and rosy, which made people happy. She would be happier if she didn't have to face an unfriendly face. Sir, take the medicine. The medicine has cooled down, so you don't have to worry about burning it. If you don't want to taste the bitterness, I've prepared some sweet hawthorn candied horse for you. Zhao Huiwei finished speaking in one breath, holding the medicine and waiting for Shen Mingnan to drink it quickly. Shen Mingnan, who couldn't get a word in, said. After a long while, he finally said, "Didn't you drink today?" Zhao Huiwei frowned and thought for a moment. I drank that in the morning, it has nothing to do with the afternoon. Shen Mingnan choked and said coldly, anyway, I've already drunk it, take it away, I don't want to drink it. But Zhao Huiwei didn't buy his trick at all. With a stern face, she handed the medicine forward again. Sir, please don't change the subject. Please be good and drink the medicine. Shen Mingnan stared at her for 3 seconds, and he found that this little village girl was becoming bolder day by day. He sneered, his tone containing a hint of danger. Zhao Huiwei, are you ordering me? The courage that Zhao Huiwei had just mustered up was gone in an instant, her brows wrinkled like a caterpillar. Serving such an evil spirit could really shorten her life by 3 years, oh no, 5 years. Her cheeks were slightly puffed up. The good meals she had eaten in the past few days had made her sallow complexion fade a little and become rosy. Her originally small, pointed face looked a bit fleshy with this puffed up look. Shen Mingnan's already impatient mood suddenly calmed down a lot. Chapter 23. Is this okay? She lowered her head, slowly took back the medicine, and said in a low voice, I didn't mean to order you, sir. I just hope that you can get better soon after taking the medicine. As she spoke, her voice became choked with sobs. When she raised her head again, her eyes were red and tears were about to fall. She looked so pitiful. If you don't want to drink, don't drink. I'm forcing you. Shen Mingnan, who made a little girl cry for the first time. He said that he felt very complicated and overwhelmed at the moment, especially when the little girl in front of him was looking at him with red eyes, as if he had bullied her. In an instant, Shen Mingnan's mood became bad again. Although there were many women in Beijing who were made to cry by him, Zhao Huiwei was different. Being mad at him for crying because I cared too much about him. This is unacceptable. Shen Mingnan couldn't help but speak in a heavier voice. Why are you crying? It's just a dose of medicine, right? Then he looked at the bowl of dark medicine, took it, raised his head and drank it all. After drinking the medicine, his tone became more fierce. Is this okay? Zhao Huiwei wiped her tears and smiled again. Master, you are the best. Shen Mingnan's face was stiff. Why don't you get out? Zhao Huiwei turned and left. Etc. Hawthorn leaves. Zhao Huiwei turned around and suddenly realized something. She looked at the candid horse in her hand and quickly placed it in front of him, grinning and saying, Young master, enjoy your meal. After they walked out, Zhao Huiwei chuckled softly. It turned out that although Shen Mingnan, who had not yet completely turned evil, had a bad temper, he was a proud and arrogant person who would only respond to soft words and not to tough ones. She actually thought that he was somewhat cute. It's definitely a primary school chicken with no way to escape. Inside the house, Shen Mingnan was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. He shouted with a dark face, Yang Yuan. The window was raised again. Master, what do you want? Did you find Yu Zhu? When mentioning Yu Zhu, Yang Yuan couldn't hide his disgust on his face. The traitor has been caught a long time ago, and is now being entertained by the brothers, just waiting for your order. Shen Mingnan was eating a hawthorn, and the next moment he felt so sour that he began to doubt his life. Is this really edible? He couldn't help but think of the group of children in Beijing who loved to eat candied haws. Sure enough, this thing was only eaten by children, and Zhao Huiwei was just a child. Shen Mingnan was very angry because he drank the bitter medicine but didn't have any sweet candy to eat. Bring him here tonight and I will interrogate him myself. Yes. He must make sure Zhao Huiwei watches the entire process tonight without missing a single detail. Let her know what the ultimate consequences will be if she offends him. And let her remember that she should never act rashly in front of him. Don't think that he will soften his heart if you cry a few times, that's just wishful thinking. Shen Mingnan, who was extremely angry, ate a few more hawthorns and finished them while swearing at the sour taste in his mouth. Zhao Huiwei, who knew nothing about the outside world, was still diligently helping Shen Mingnan boil water for a bath. If development continues at this pace, retirement will be just around the corner. It soon got dark. Zhao Huiwei looked at the fire and thought about going to the mountain to carry firewood tomorrow. She didn't want her family to be the only one in the village unable to cook because of lack of firewood. Water gurgled out, and Zhao Huiwei went to fetch a bucket again, pouring hot water into the bathtub bucket by bucket, and then went to the well on the left side of the yard to fetch cold water. After all this going on, Zhao Huiwei was completely exhausted. The physical fitness of this body is really not good, unlike her real body, which is as strong as a bull. Although Zhao Huiwei is a lazy person who just eats and waits for death in real life, she is good at sports and has won first place in various competitions in the student sports meet. If some competitions had not coincided with each other's dates, she would have signed up for all the events and won first place in all of them. Zhao Huiwei touched the little arms and legs, thinking to herself that she must eat more in the future to restore her health. Even if you can't beat them, you should try to be the fastest one. Zhao Huiwei felt the water temperature, looked up and called out, "Sir, the water is ready, you can take a bath now." Shen Mingnan walked out slowly and took a look. It was still the same bucket as last time, so he decided to teach this little country girl a lesson about the strict separation of men and women. Chapter 24. Sir, will you be frivolous with me? Why is there only this one bathtub? Shen Mingnan was the first to ask. The person involved, Zhao Huiwei, was stunned for a moment after hearing this. She raised her hand and touched her hair with embarrassment, because my family is poor. Zhao Huiwei thought that his fussy temper had relapsed, so she hurriedly said, "Don't worry, sir. I have washed this bucket 3 times." After saying that, Zhao Huiwei felt that 3 strokes seemed too few, and hurriedly said, "No, it's 5 strokes, polishing both inside and outside to a bright shine." Shen Mingnan. How should he explain that he didn't mean that? So he took a deep breath, his brows were serious. "I am a man, you are a woman. I am staying at your house temporarily because of my injury, which has already damaged your reputation, not to mention that now we are bathing in the same tub together. What do you want to say? If you want to remedy the fact that her reputation has been damaged, please move out tonight." In her heart, Zhao Huiwei was beating someone to the ground like crazy, but her face was full of sincerity. She stared at Shen Mingnan with her clear-cut eyes. "But sir, I don't mind. It's coming again, that feeling that he has impure thoughts is coming again." Shen Mingnan was speechless for a while, and after thinking about his words, he said, what if you are so defenseless and someone is frivolous with you?" Zhao Huiwei was even more confused. "Sir, are you going to be frivolous with me?" Shen Mingnan? Which word in his words referred to himself. This little country girl not only loves to have wild ideas, but she also can't understand the literal meaning. Shen Mingnan was so angry that he almost fell backwards. He looked down at Zhao Huiwei with a pair of cold black eyes. "You wish?" Leaving behind this cold sentence, he turned around and walked into the bathroom. Oh, Zhao Huiwei, who had not yet come to her senses, stared at the curtain without saying anything. After a long while, a voice came from inside, "Get me a new bathtub tomorrow." R. Zhao Huiwei stood outside, feeling awkward. In ancient times, it was quite expensive to make a bathtub. Shen Mingnan didn't hear Zhao Huiwei's reply. He closed his eyes and said with anger, "I'll pay for it." "Okay. Which hill should we bury her on tonight? Or should we bury her together with Yu Zhu?" Shen Mingnan was thinking seriously while taking a shower. Shen Mingnan returned to the inner room and coughed lightly, and the broken window was opened again. Shen Mingnan watched Yang Yuan crawling in with great effort. How could he have such a stupid subordinate? Instead of going through the front door, he had to climb through the window. "Master," Shen Mingnan said, in a cold voice, and then asked, "Is Yu Zhuti here?" Yang Yuan instantly perked up upon hearing this, and looked ready to do something big. "Yu Huai has already brought someone here, they should be here soon." "Well, very good." Shen Mingnan nodded, then waved for Yang Yuan to come closer, and lowered his voice and said, "After I call Zhao Huiwei over, you guys should act more fierce and come in." "Yang Yuan, ? Don't climb the window. It doesn't look very fierce. Just come in through the front door. It's bound to scare people. If the blows on Yu Zhu aren't bad enough, you can hit him twice more to make sure he looks even worse. Do you understand?" Yang Yuan nodded slowly. He understood roughly. There was just one thing he didn't understand. It was just an interrogation of a traitor, but this had to be rehearsed in advance. Seeing Yang Yuan in a daze, Shen Mingnan looked worried. "Now that you understand, why don't you go down and make arrangements?" "Yes." At his master's signal, Yang Yuan climbed out the window again and left. He stood outside the window, enjoying the evening breeze. It was really confusing. Shen Mingnan sat quietly for a moment, and guessed that Zhao Huiwei should have started taking a bath, so he slowly took off his clothes and prepared to change the medicine. I also thought that if she didn't go to take a shower and rushed in again, wouldn't that be a good thing for her? Thinking of this, Shen Mingnan paused and stood up to pull down the bolt. He made sure that no one could come in before he took off his clothes and changed his medicine. On the other side, Zhao Huiwei had no time to care about him. She washed the bucket 3 more times before starting to take a comfortable bath. She hasn't even started to dislike him yet, but has already disliked her. There is nothing dirty about us delicate pig girls. Zhao Huiwei soaked for a while before she began to untie her 2 braided hair and gently rubbed it with soap nuts. Her original hair was very long and the ends were dry and dull. Zhao Huiwei planned to take care of her frail body for a while before cutting the dry hair at the ends of her hair. Chapter 25 Betrayal should not exist in the world. After Zhao Huiwei cleaned the bathroom, she wiped her hair with a dry towel and yawned as she went to the room. She would wait for her hair to dry for a while before getting ready to go to bed. Who would have thought that when Zhao Huiwei came out, she saw Shen Mingnan, dressed in black, sitting in the middle of the room, as if he had been waiting for a long time. He sat lazily in the chair, one hand leaning on the back of the chair, and the other hand playing with a few chopsticks on the table, making a thudding sound. Hearing the noise, his sharp eyes caught sight of Zhao Huiwei who came out. Zhao Huiwei, who had already stepped out with one foot, quickly retracted her foot. She must have opened it the wrong way, otherwise why would this guy be here? Shen Mingnan stopped what he was doing and said lazily, "Come here." Zhao Huiwei walked over obediently, her loose hair making her face look even smaller. She looked obedient and asked, "Sir, why haven't you rested yet at this hour?" Shen Mingnan smiled lazily and said to Zhao Huiwei, "Don't worry, I'll take you to see a play." Then he clapped his hands, "Pull it in." Bang. The door suddenly opened. Zhao Huiwei looked up and saw a man with a fierce face coming in. He stared with his eyes wide open, pursed his lips, and bared his teeth as if he wanted to eat someone. He walked with big steps and swung his hands very vigorously. He looked very strange. She remembered that this was one of Shen Mingnan's subordinates, so. Zhao Huiwei turned her head to look at Shen Mingnan with a questioning look. It had only been a short time since they last saw each other, so how could such a healthy person go crazy? Shen Mingnan had no expression on his face. How about burying 3 people in the back hill tonight? Yang Yuan stood at one side with his chest and head held high, not looking around. After he came in, another person came in behind him. He was dressed in black, with his hair tied up high, ordinary facial features, a strong build, and an expressionless face. He was holding a person in his hand. The person looked like he had been fished out of water of blood. The whole person was held by the man in black as if he had no bones. Bang. The bloody man was thrown on the ground. The man in black respectfully knelt on one knee to salute Shen Mingnan. "Master, the person is here." Shen Mingnan raised his hand and motioned for him to stand aside. With a smile on his face, he looked at the stunned Zhao Huiwei and said, "Let me introduce them to you. They are my most trusted subordinates. The one on the left is Yang Yuan, and the one on the right is Yu Huai." Zhao Huiwei pulled the corner of her mouth and greeted, "Hello." Then his eyes involuntarily fell on the bloody man who was not aware of his own life or death. What's going on this late at night? I don't know if it's because she's used to it, but Zhao Huiwei clearly doesn't feel as excited as she did in the previous experiences. Oh, that's not right. Used to it? Zhao Huiwei was panicking. Could it be that she was led astray? She is a person who comes from a peaceful era. Why is she forced to experience these bloody things every night? She is just a helpless and weak little girl. The bloody man on the ground made a hoarse sound from his throat, which was very harsh. He tried to struggle to stand up, but fell to the ground the next second, leaving a bloody mark on the ground. Zhao Huiwei's scalp was numb, and she couldn't help asking, "Master, what is he doing?" Shen Mingnan was waiting for her to say this. He chuckled, his emotions unrecognizable, and asked in a cold and hoarse voice, "Do you want to know?" Zhao Huiwei was stunned for a moment, then quickly shook her head, "No." Shen Mingnan. How can he accept this? The chopsticks in his hand made a thud sound on the table, and with a wave of his hand, one of the chopsticks quickly pierced into his shoulder blade. "R." The bloody man on the ground, who didn't know whether he was dead or alive, screamed, raised his hand with difficulty to cover his shoulder blade, and struggled in pain on the ground. Zhao Huiwei's mind was full of "Da me, da me, da mayo. See? This is what happens when you mess with me." A trace of blood flashed in Shen Mingnan's eyes, and his thin lips opened slightly. "Betrayal should not exist in this world, Yu Zhu." The bloody man stopped struggling and slowly raised his head. His facial features were blurred by the blood. The only thing that could be seen clearly were his eyes, which were full of pleading. Master, master, please, please let me go. I will never do it again. I will never betray you again. Yu Zhu's voice was hoarse and unpleasant, like the sound of a stone scratching on the ground. Shen Mingnan looked at Yu Zhu, who was kneeling on the ground, with pity and shook his head gently. Yu Zhu, you still don't understand. Betrayal, along with everything of the betrayer, should not exist in this world. Chapter 26. No matter what you say, I will agree to you. Yu Zhu was horrified and looked at Shen Mingnan pleadingly. No, just kill me and don't touch my family. Shen Mingnan picked up the chopsticks again, a boyish mischievous look on his face. It's too late. This time the chopsticks pierced his footbone accurately, and he didn't even have the strength to scream. Zhao Huiwei was stunned. The fear in her heart grew stronger and stronger. Even if he hadn't turned completely evil, he was still a lunatic. She actually thought he was cute at noon. What the hell was cute? If she has this illusion again in the future, please remind her that she will beat herself to death. Shen Mingnan glanced at the pale-faced Zhao Huiwei and suddenly felt bored. Throw it up the back hill. When Zhao Huiwei heard the word back mountain, she became even more panicked. In just a few days, the mountain behind her home would become a burial ground. What if someone from the village went up the mountain to cut grass or something and suddenly found a corpse? No, not just one, but a group. So at this time, who should take the blame? By then, everyone in the village will think that it was Zhao Huiwei who was a murderer and buried the bodies in the wilderness. How could she continue to live in Luohua village? Whenever she thought about having to bear the blame for being a villain in the future, she became anxious. Seeing Shen Mingnan was about to leave, Zhao Huiwei grabbed his sleeve anxiously. Master. Shen Mingnan paused, his eyes fell on the pale and thin hand, and then looked at the frightened Zhao Huiwei. What's the matter? She looked at Yu Zhu lying on the ground, and a trace of pity flashed in her eyes. Shen Mingnan's aura turned cold. He knew that Zhao Huiwei was kind-hearted. If this little village girl dared to plead for this man, he would kill her. Shen Mingnan reached out and slowly stroked her hand, until Zhao Huiwei came back to her senses when she touched his slightly cold fingers. She looked at Shen Mingnan, who happened to be looking at her as well. There was gentleness in his eyes, like a good-tempered person. My benefactor, no matter what you say, I will agree to it. Zhao Huiwei got goosebumps again when he suddenly called her benefactor. She didn't say anything for a long time, and even the sanitation duo who were preparing to clean the scene looked at her. The one lying on the ground was even more upset, especially when he heard Shen Mingnan write out such a blank check. He looked at Zhao Huiwei with eager eyes. As if she was the savior. Zhao Huiwei took another small step back. I have a small request. Explain. That's right, can you drag them out and throw them farther away? Zhao Huiwei's voice was weak, but it was loud enough for the people present to hear clearly. Everyone. After Yu Zhu was frightened, hatred appeared in his eyes. Zhao Huiwei gritted her teeth and continued, it would be best if we could dig a hole and bury it. By the way, remember to bury it far away and not near here, otherwise it will be discovered and cause trouble. Yu Zhu, who was lying on the ground, felt hopeless. How could a healthy person suddenly have a mouth? Shen Mingnan. How come this guy is more capable than a villain like me? After saying that, Zhao Huiwei added, is it okay? Shen Mingnan became cheerful again, and suddenly raised his hand and patted Zhao Huiwei on the head. Of course. Then he said to Yang Yuan and Yu Huai, just do as she says. Yang Yuan had mixed feelings, yes. Yu Zhu laughed, suddenly pulled out the chopsticks from his shoulder blade and flew forward, quickly stabbing the chopsticks in his hand into Zhao Huiwei who was closer to him. The incident happened so quickly that no one could react. Zhao Huiwei looked at the chopsticks getting closer and closer to her in horror, unable to react at all. A cold fragrance came to her, and she felt dizzy and was held in Shen Mingnan's arms. He quickly waved his hand to knock the chopsticks out of Yu Zhu's hand, and then slapped him on the chest. A shadow flew to the ground, and after spitting out a few mouthfuls of blood, there was no movement anymore. Master! Are you okay? Yu Huai's usually expressionless face changed drastically. Then, they knelt on one knee together with Yang Yuan and said in unison, we failed to protect our master. Please punish us, master. Shen Mingnan suddenly covered his chest, a trace of blood oozing from the corner of his mouth. He looked pale and coughed lightly. It's okay, take him and bury him. Chapter 27. You haven't paid us monthly wages for 3 months. Zhao Huiwei seemed to have just come to her senses and quickly helped him sit down on the chair. Then he took out his handkerchief from his arms and tried to wipe the blood from the corner of his mouth. Unexpectedly, he turned his head slightly away, with an undisguised look of disgust on his face. He coughed lightly and took out a white handkerchief from his arms. Use mine. Zhao Huiwei. It's already this time, why do you return it to me? What a fussy man. But no matter how picky Zhao Huiwei was, she endured it, because this time it was this evil spirit that saved her again. There was a hint of his unique cool fragrance on his handkerchief. Zhao Huiwei gently wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, her almond eyes full of guilt. After wiping it, he was about to pull Shen Mingnan's hand, but he actually dodged and refused to let anyone touch him. Okay, I'll handle the rest myself. Zhao Huiwei's eyes widened when she heard this and she refused. No. Persistently pulling his hand, he rolled up his sleeve to reveal the wound caused by the chopsticks. The wound was on the back of the hand, like a damaged crack on the finest porcelain jade. And this crack was caused by Zhao Huiwei. Shen Mingnan admitted that he was shocked for a second by Zhao Huiwei's strong actions. Then he looked at this daring woman and laughed angrily. Zhao Huiwei, you still dare to refute my orders? Aren't you afraid that I will bury you in the back mountain? I'm scared. Zhao Huiwei replied almost immediately, but her eyes were glued to Shen Mingnan's hand. She whispered, no matter how scared I am, I have to take care of your wound first. As she said that, she went to find some medicine for wounds, brought some gauze, and helped Shen Mingnan check if there was any other dirt in the wound. She then carefully sprinkled some medicine powder on it. Zhao Huiwei's hands were warm, and they felt a hint of warmth when they touched his slightly cold fingers. Shen Mingnan lowered his eyes and could see her lowering her eyelashes, applying the medicine seriously. He is obviously terribly afraid of him, but he still wants to help him. What a strange person. After experiencing another thrilling night, Zhao Huiwei was rarely able to sleep. The scene of her near-death experience kept replaying in her mind. If Shen Mingnan hadn't been there at that time, she would probably have been pierced through the heart by that chopstick, right? She slowly curled up in the quilt, put her hand on her chest, and felt the strong heartbeat. She was still alive. In her room. Shen Mingnan felt a burning pain in his lungs with every breath, and also felt a toothache. He turned over the medicine bottle that Yang Yuan had sent him, and there was only one pill left in it. After swallowing it, I felt the burning sensation subsided a lot. After Yang Yuan and Yu Huai buried the body, they knelt on the ground the whole time. Seeing his master's pale face, Yang Yuan felt guilty and said angrily, Master, you shouldn't have saved her. She was planning to die, and now you have used your inner strength and hurt your heart again. Shen Mingnan closed his eyes tightly. He didn't know why he wanted to save this little village girl who always made him angry. Maybe it was because she had been serving him wholeheartedly during this period of time, which made him feel grateful. Gratitude. Thinking of this, Shen Mingnan sneered at himself. He had no conscience, so he didn't have this thing. However, since the little village girl is so good to him, it is not impossible to let her become his own. He will observe for a while. If Zhao Huiwei can gain his trust, he will let her be his personal maid. When he returns to the capital, he will reluctantly take her with him. After making up his mind, Shen Mingnan suddenly felt relieved and said to them calmly, Keep Zhao Huiwei, don't move. Yang Yuan said rather aggrievedly, Yes. Then Shen Mingnan asked, Are there any more medicines? Yang Yuan was stunned for a moment, and touched his nose embarrassedly, No more. Shen Mingnan frowned. Before he could say anything, Yang Yuan spoke up, Master, it's not that I don't want to give you the medicine. It's just that, the silver we brought is not enough. Shen Mingnan thought of many possibilities. Maybe Yang Yuan was too busy to take care of it, or maybe he was on their way to make the medicine but hadn't finished it yet. He never thought that he had no money to buy the medicine. What about his bathtub? When Shen Mingnan thought of this, his face darkened. Where is the money I usually give you? Yang Yuan looked aggrieved. The medicine you take is bought by your subordinates with their own money. And, you haven't paid us monthly wages for 3 months. Chapter 28. Don't worry, you won't die. The scene was very quiet, even Yu Huai couldn't help but push him, signaling Yang Yuan to stop talking. Yang Yuan was a straightforward person. Seeing Yu Huai harassing him, he couldn't help but get angry. Why do you keep picking on me? I'm telling you the truth. My master isn't very rich. Shen Mingnan. What should I do if I feel insulted? He felt that his internal injuries were even worse because he was so angry. Shen Mingnan had a cold face and looked very serious. You guys can leave first. We will discuss the money later. After Yang Yuan and the other two left, Shen Mingnan lifted the quilt and lay down to cover himself. He should just go to sleep first. Problems like lack of money shouldn't be his concern. The next morning, Zhao Huiwei woke up early because she was very worried about Shen Mingnan's injuries. She pushed the door of the inner room and found it was not closed tightly. After struggling for a while, she decided to follow her heart and sneak in to take a look. The light in the room was not very bright, and Zhao Huiwei could vaguely see a bulge on the bed. She walked carefully to his bedside and looked down to see his peaceful sleeping face. The sleeping Shen Mingnan's eyebrows and eyes were soft, not as sharp as when he was awake. Moreover, this person really didn't move at all when he slept, as if he wasn't even breathing. Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei's face turned pale again. After hesitating for a long time, Zhao Huiwei stretched out a trembling finger to the nostril of Shen Mingnan, feeling the warm breath, and then she breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, I am still alive. Just as she was about to pull her hand back, a warm hand suddenly grabbed her wrist. Zhao Huiwei was so scared that she covered her mouth with her other hand and her whole body shuddered, looking at the owner of the hand, Shen Mingnan, in horror. His eyes were cold and his handsome face was full of annoyance. Zhao Huiwei felt like she was in a large-scale social death scene. She was like a criminal who sneaked around an attempted assassination but failed, but was caught. What are you doing here? Shen Mingnan held her wrist, propped himself up and half leaned against the head of the bed, and asked in a cold voice. Zhao Huiwei was speechless. She couldn't just say, I just want to see whether you are dead or not. Master, I was just too worried about you. Zhao Huiwei said, her eyes red again, with a look of grievance, I was worried about your injury and didn't sleep well all night. I wanted to come and see you in the morning. Shen Mingnan looked at her for a few seconds before slowly letting go of her hand. He said unhappily, don't worry, you won't die. Zhao Huiwei. Why does your tone sound so annoying? Then I feel relieved. Please have a good rest, young master. After saying this, he walked out. When I looked at the wrist, I saw a red circle, which showed how strong the force was. A dog man is a dog man, and even if he saves her, it won't change the fact that he is a dog. Zhao Huiwei understood clearly that Shen Mingnan's old injury relapsed because of saving her, so she could only do her best to heal him. It takes money to support people, and Zhao Huiwei, who originally wanted to be a lazy guy, has to find a way to make money. A sad reality that we have to face. In real life, apart from her knowledge of eating and exercise, she has basically no knowledge of other things. Food, she didn't want to make and sell it herself, as it would be time-consuming, laborious and stressful. She had to find a way to make money while sitting at home. Early in the morning, Zhao Huiwei made noodles, but after the noodles were needed, there were no ingredients to make soup. As the weather is getting hotter and there is no refrigeration here, Zhao Huiwei seldom buys meat. So she thought of the two chickens. She squatted in front of the bamboo cage and wondered whether she should pluck the feathers first or chop off the necks first. I thought about it for a long time but couldn't come up with a reason, because she didn't know how to kill a chicken. Zhao Huiwei estimated that it should be around 6 o'clock now, and there would not be enough time if they delayed any further. So she shouted to the yard, Yang Yuan. Yang Yuan, who was hiding in the peach tree and stealing peaches, said. Yang Yuan was very confused, he was discovered even though he hid so deeply. There was a rustling sound from the peach tree. Zhao Huiwei looked over and saw Yang Yuan jumping down from the tree. There were a few leaves on his hair and he was holding a peach in his hand, not sure if it was ripe or not. She just tried to shout, and this guy was really there, stealing peaches from her tree. Chapter 29. Who is in the same industry as you? But now she didn't care about whether it was peaches or not. She had another thing she wanted Yang Yuan to do, so she waved and said, Yang Yuan, come here. Yang Yuan felt unhappy when he saw Zhao Huiwei at this moment. It was not for any other reason, but because this woman had caused his master to be injured again, so he did not have a good impression of Zhao Huiwei. Seeing her calling him over, he said unhappily, just stand here and talk, what's the matter? Zhao Huiwei. As expected of a subordinate of this bastard, she deserves a beating. Zhao Huiwei was afraid of disturbing Shen Mingnan, so she moved a few steps towards Yang Yuan and said, "Help me." Yang Yuan chewed a peach and said vaguely, "No help." Zhao Huiwei looked at the chicken in the cage and said again, "For the sake of our fellow colleagues, please help me kill this chicken." Yang Yuan? When did he become her colleague? So he asked, "Who is your colleague? Please recognize your identity." Zhao Huiwei had a look on her face that said, "Stop messing around," with disapproval in her eyes. "We are all here to serve the master, so why should we distinguish between high and low?" He was speechless. Seeing that he remained silent, Zhao Huiwei continued, "When it's ready, I'll make you a bowl of noodles." Yang Yuan paused while chewing the peach and asked uncertainly, "Really?" Oh, Zhao Huiwei saw through his essence and saw his true nature. He was just a freeloader. So he said speechlessly, "Am I still lying to you?" Yang Yuan finished the peach in 2 bites and said, "Okay." As he was about to pick up the chicken, he took the time to look back and give his feedback on his experience of eating peaches. "Your peaches are really astringent, they make my teeth sour. You've gnawed it till only the core is left." Zhao Huiwei was too lazy to pay attention to him. After handing the chicken to him, she went to boil water, washed 2 pieces of ginger, and then picked a handful of onions and cabbage from the vegetable garden at the back. After washing, Yang Yuan was almost done. The chicken feathers were plucked cleanly and the chicken blood was placed in a porcelain bowl on the stove. Zhao Huiwei was very satisfied. She put the chicken on the chopping board and cut it into small pieces. She directly discarded the chicken head and chicken butt. Then boil some hot water in a pot and pour the chicken into blanch it. After the blood foam is almost cooked out, take out the chicken and rinse it with cold water. Zhao Huiwei prepared a clean porcelain pot, put the chicken in it, added ginger and scallions, and finally sprinkled some seasonings in it. Pour water to a certain level, put the porcelain pot on the fire and stew it, and it will be almost done when the time comes. After finishing her work, Zhao Huiwei boiled medicine for Shen Mingnan on the small stove. The medicine was only enough for today, and she would go to the town to buy more tomorrow. Yang Yuan stood aside and watched Zhao Huiwei, who was busy like a top. His dissatisfaction with her subsided a lot. No matter what, she was taking care of her master sincerely. It seemed that he shouldn't take his anger out on her because of Yu Zhu. After the chicken had been stewed for half an hour, Zhao Huiwei opened the lid and the fragrance instantly filled the air. Yang Yuan was even worse. He squatted beside the chicken like a pug. When he saw that it was almost ready, his saliva was drooling. Why do Shen Mingnan's subordinates act like they have never eaten meat before? Zhao Huiwei cooked the noodles in hot water, and after they were cooked, she placed them in a large bowl, added freshly cooked chicken soup, a few pieces of chicken, blanched some cabbage, sprinkled with chopped green onions, and poured hot oil on them. The fragrant noodles were ready. Considering Shen Mingnan's physical condition, she did not add any spicy food to his dish, but she and Yang Yuan added chili sauce that had been prepared in advance. Zhao Huiwei placed Shen Mingnan's portion on the table in the main room, then knocked on the door gently, asking him to come for breakfast. As soon as Shen Mingnan came out, he saw Zhao Huiwei sitting at the table eating noodles in small bites, and Yang Yuan sitting at the door eating with slurping sounds. Before Shen Mingnan sat down, he came in with an empty bowl, scratching his head in embarrassment. "Miss Zhao, can I have another bowl?" Zhao Huiwei smiled and said, "Of course." As he said that, he went to the kitchen and prepared another bowl for Yang Yuan. Shen Mingnan looked at his subordinates who were eagerly waiting and snorted in his heart, "What a disgrace." After sitting down gracefully, I picked up my chopsticks and took a bite. It seemed pretty good. Chapter 30 Candy. After clearing the dishes, he saw Shen Mingnan still sitting on the chair, so he walked up to him and asked caringly, "Sir, do you need me to help you go to rest?" Shen Mingnan looked outside. From his perspective, he could just see the lush peach tree. He didn't even glance at Zhao Huiwei and said in a calm voice, "I'm not that fragile." As he said that, he stood up, picked up the chair and walked towards the door. Zhao Huiwei stroked her chin and looked at his tall back. Today's character is aloof and has a bad temper. Zhao Huiwei complained in her heart and went to pour the medicine for him. She let the medicine cool for a quarter of an hour before bringing it to Shen Mingnan. Just like before, when he saw the medicine he acted like he saw an enemy, with a look of deep resentment and bitterness on his face, but he no longer pestered her for a long time before getting her to drink it. Although he was not happy this time, he took it and drank it. Zhao Huiwei raised her eyebrows slightly, with a look of relief on her face, as if her naughty child had finally grown up. She smiled with her eyebrows curved. Sir, wait a minute, I'll get you some sweet maltose. Shen Mingnan had a sullen face and said nothing. Yang Yuan on the side sighed in his heart, thinking that the amount of medicine his master took in the capital might not be as much as in this small Luohua village. Seeing Shen Mingnan's eyes looking at him, Yang Yuan immediately pretended to be looking at the scenery. He knew nothing. How many people are left after they sent us these days? Seeing that the matter was being discussed, Yang Yuan thought for a while before saying, the 3 waves sent by Master Shen were all wiped out. The last wave of the 3 waves sent by the Crown Prince is estimated to have 12 people. We can't find any trace of them at the moment. Shen Mingnan nodded to show that he understood, and looked into the distance. There were vast mountains and flying birds. This was a peaceful and suitable place to live. After Yang Yuan reported the situation, he found a secluded place to hide out. His current task was to protect the safety of his master. Zhao Huiwei walked out of the house with a few pieces of maltose in her hand, and then stuffed them all into Shen Mingnan's palm. Here, sir, please eat it quickly. It's very sweet. The candy was not very big and looked very ordinary. Under Zhao Huiwei's expectant gaze, Shen Mingnan tasted a piece. The light sweetness did not make people feel sick, and the bitterness in the mouth quickly disappeared. Shen Mingnan suddenly felt that every time he took bitter medicine, he would eat the sweet candy given by Zhao Huiwei, and it seemed that taking medicine was not so difficult to accept. Seeing Shen Mingnan eating candy, Zhao Huiwei smiled happily, turned around and wanted to go into the woodshed to find a backpack. She had to go down the mountain to carry firewood while the sun was not too strong. But, Sister Huihui. Zhao Huiwei's voice suddenly sounded, and even Shen Mingnan looked over. Then Zhao Huiwei saw Zhao Huiwei's face slowly turning red, and she said in a delicate voice, Sister Huihui, can you open the door for me? Zhao Huiwei. She glanced at Shen Mingnan and saw that he had a calm expression. Shen Mingnan's dark eyes turned, and they were full of sparkling light. Why are you looking at me, benefactor? You have guests coming. Well, he didn't react at all, so why should she bother to help him ward off bad luck in love? Besides, she didn't want Zhao Huiwei to be involved with this big villain in the first place, so as to avoid hurting innocent people. Now it seems that this is no longer a problem she can stop, so let it go. Zhao Huiwei smiled and generously opened the door to welcome the person in. Sister Huiwei, why are you here again today? Zhao Huiwei blushed, holding a small basket in her hand. These are the dried mushrooms from my home. I'll send some for you to try. Then, as if she had just noticed Shen Mingnan, she bowed shyly and said, My little girl Zhao Huiwei, nice to meet you, brother Shen. When I raised my head again, I saw Shen Mingnan's pair of black eyes that seemed to contain a smile, which could make people unconsciously indulge in them. As they got closer, Zhao Huiwei was more and more impressed by Shen Mingnan's unparalleled handsomeness and his face like a jade crown. The noble temperament that emanates from her body is unmatched by ordinary people. She heard that Shen Mingnan did not belong here and seemed to be from somewhere else. She didn't know where exactly, but this was an opportunity for wealth and glory. Chapter 31 You have to take good care of him. Zhao Huiwei saw that Shen Mingnan was not interested and acted in a very aloof manner. On the contrary, it was his indifferent attitude that made Zhao Huiwei admire him even more. He was completely different from those big and strong guys in the village. He would not blush when he saw her like those villagers, and he would even stammer when speaking to her, which was annoying. Zhao Huiwei wanted to talk to Shen Mingnan, and with sincerity in her eyes, Brother Shen, are you feeling better? Shen Mingnan didn't want to pay attention to her. She was even more annoying than Zhao Huiwei. He didn't want to cause trouble, so he just replied calmly, Thank you for your concern, Miss Huiwei. Shen is fine now. Zhao Huiwei's face was still red, and she seemed relieved when she heard that. That's good. Brother Shen, I have some herbs that are specially used to treat injuries. I'll go get some for you. Zhao Huiwei's eyelids twitched, and she clearly noticed a hint of impatience between Shen Mingnan's eyebrows. She quickly picked up the large backpack and walked out with Zhao Huiwei. Didn't Sister Huiwei say yesterday that you would accompany me to the mountains to dig wild vegetables today? I'm ready, let's go. Only after half pushing and half pulling Zhao Huiwei outside and then closing the door heavily did Zhao Huiwei breathe a sigh of relief. As soon as she looked up, she saw Zhao Huiwei's angry eyes. She shook off Zhao Huiwei's hand and said, Why did you push me out? I haven't finished talking yet. Zhao Huiwei laughed and said, let's talk about it next time. I still have to go up the mountain to collect firewood. Zhao Huiwei agreed when she thought about it. It was indeed not easy for a woman like her to stay with a man. She was not as shameless as Zhao Huiwei. Then he nodded in agreement. Okay, Brother Shen is living in your house now, you have to take good care of him for me. Zhao Huiwei, oh. How can you make yourself look like a mistress when you haven't even started yet? Zhao Huiwei really had no desire to continue talking to this person, so she turned around and left without bothering to pay attention to her. Hey, I'm talking to you. The only thing that responded to her was Zhao Huiwei's back that was getting farther and farther away. This really pissed off Zhao Huiwei. She was the youngest daughter of the village chief, and had been spoiled since she was a child. Everyone in the village praised her when they saw her. She had never been turned down by anyone. She was indeed an orphan without a father or a mother, and she had no upbringing. Zhao Huiwei felt much more balanced after thinking this. There was no need for her to get acquainted with an orphan and lower her status. It was not until they reached the open mountains that Zhao Huiwei's nauseous mood, which felt like she had swallowed a fly, felt much better. She didn't know where Zhao Huiwei got her confidence from, as if Shen Mingnan would definitely fall in love with her. Even if the heroine of the original book didn't exist, the person Shen Mingnan liked couldn't be an ordinary girl like Zhao Huiwei. She must stay away from her in the future, and she must return everything she gave her. There are many trees on the mountain, and a lot of dry firewood has fallen to the ground due to the wind. Zhao Huiwei bent down to pick up the things for a while and then she felt dizzy. The physical condition of this body is too poor. She needs to improve it slowly, otherwise if the situation that night happens again, she will have no room to hide. Thinking of this, she encouraged herself, ignored her physical fatigue, and continued picking up dead branches. It was not until the sun gradually grew higher that Zhao Huiwei found a shady place to rest. Then she looked at the spoils she had picked up, a large basket full of them, and nodded with a sense of accomplishment. Then she considered whether she could carry the bag or not. She was so excited while picking up the bags that she exceeded the limit. But she was reluctant to let Zhao Huiwei throw some away. After resting enough, Zhao Huiwei stood up and tried to lift it, but she couldn't lift it. Then he squatted down and tried to carry it on his back, and almost knocked over the whole basket of firewood. It seemed like she had to rest on the mountain tonight. Just when Zhao Huiwei was looking worried. Sister Huiwei. Huh? Someone called her. Zhao Huiwei turned around and saw a tall, dark-skinned man holding 3 rabbits in his hands. The man's name is Hu Qiang, and he is also a villager of Luohua village. At the same time, he is also a hunter who is good at hunting for a living. He is the only one at home with his old mother. He is a warm-hearted and filial person, but his mother has been ill for many years, so all the money he earned from hunting is used to treat her illness. Therefore, he is still unmarried at the age of 22. Chapter 32. The world is still full of love. Zhao Huiwei has always had a good impression of people who are filial. Seeing Hu Qiang, he greeted him with a smile. Brother Hu, you just came back from hunting in the mountains. Hu Qiang nodded, raised the 3 rabbits in his hand, and said a little embarrassedly, the harvest these days is not very good. They are just wild rabbits and pheasants, nothing good. Zhao Huiwei waved her hand and said, well, Brother Hu, don't be so modest. Everyone in the village knows that you are the best. Hu Qiang looked at Zhao Huiwei in a daze. In his impression, Zhao Huiwei liked to help others, but was also very shy. Never talked to them much. Looking at Zhao Huiwei again now, I find that she has changed a lot. Not only did she become much more cheerful, but even her usually sallow complexion became fair and tender. Her hair was neatly tied into 2 braids and hung in front of her. Some of her hair was scattered on her forehead, looking fluffy. Her eyes were smiling and the corners of her eyes were slightly raised. It was only at this moment that he seemed to realize how beautiful Zhao Huiwei was. After realizing this, he quickly lowered his head to hide his shyness. He pointed at Zhao Huiwei's basket of firewood and said, Sister Huiwei, let me help you carry it home. Zhao Huiwei hesitated for a moment. Isn't this a bit bad? Hu Qiang waved his hand and said with a smile, it's okay, I'll just go down there too. Zhao Huiwei did not insist and quickly thanked him. Then I would like to thank Brother Hu. Let me help you carry the rabbit in your hand. Hu Qiang handed the firewood to Zhao Huiwei without saying a word, and walked down the mountain step by step with steady steps, carrying the firewood on his back. The two of them arrived at the foot of the mountain near noon. Zhao Huiwei led Hu Qiang into the firewood room. After the firewood was stacked, Zhao Huiwei thanked him again. "Thank you for your hard work, brother Hu." Hu Qiang wiped the sweat from his forehead and said, "It's okay." Seeing that he was done, Hu Qiang walked into the yard and prepared to go back. Zhao Huiwei handed him his rabbit and said, "Brother Hu, wait a moment." As he said this, he walked towards the main room, picked up a bowl, poured a bowl of water in it and went out. Seeing Hu Qiang still standing there, he quickly handed him the water and said, "Brother Hu, have a drink of water before you leave." Hu Qiang looked down and saw Zhao Huiwei's little face tilted up, which was tanned red by the sun and looked quite cute. "Hey." He took it and drank it in one gulp. When he was leaving, he hesitated again. After thinking for a while, he took out a rabbit from his hand and said, "Sister Huiwei, I'll give this one to you. It's not easy for you to live here alone." Zhao Huiwei's almond-shaped eyes widened instantly when she heard that, and she pushed back, "No, I can't accept it. I haven't even thanked you for carrying firewood for me yet, and now you're giving me a rabbit. That doesn't make sense." Hu Qiang was not good at speaking, and after a long while he managed to utter, "It's okay, just one rabbit is nothing serious." Zhao Huiwei shook her head. "You still have Aunt Chen at home who needs to be taken care of. You can take this rabbit back and give it to Aunt Chen as a supplement." "I don't want it anyway." Seeing Zhao Huiwei's insistence, Hu Qiang had no choice but to take the rabbit back. He felt even better about Zhao Huiwei. "Then I'll leave first. If you need anything, come to my house and I'll help you if I can." Zhao Huiwei nodded and watched Hu Qiang leave. She couldn't help sighing in her heart, "Look, what simple and kind villagers they are. The world is still full of love." But the next second she was startled by Shen Mingnan, who was leaning against the door out of nowhere. His face was cold, and he looked at Zhao Huiwei as if he had a knife in his mouth. Zhao Huiwei's heart skipped a beat. No way, she was disturbing him just because she was chatting with someone. "Young master." Zhao Huiwei called out, but he didn't say anything. Then he continued, "I promise to speak more quietly next time, so as not to disturb you." Shen Mingnan hummed after a long while, "Cook, I'm hungry. This guy eats and sleeps and eats every day, living like a pig. The problem is that he hasn't gained any weight yet." At noon, Zhao Huiwei steamed rice, heated up the chicken soup she had made in the morning, mixed some spicy cabbage, and fried eggs, which was her lunch for the day. The weather was hot and Zhao Huiwei had no appetite. She took 2 bites and stopped eating. She really wanted to eat some refreshing cucumber. Chapter 33 Old House. After lunch, Shen Mingnan went back to his room to take a nap. Zhao Huiwei took out a bowl, mixed half of the chicken into it, and prepared to go to the old house. Come to think of it, the original body's grandmother hasn't come to see her since she broke off the engagement last time. Maybe it was because she was mad about her breaking off the engagement or something, so Zhao Huiwei decided to go and see her. When I walked to the door and just closed it, a slightly plump woman came towards me. Hui, where are you going?" The person who came was Zhao Huiwei's second aunt, Zhao Xie. Zhao Huiwei blinked her eyes. She didn't expect her second aunt to come to her place. She answered truthfully, "I'm going to the old house to see Grandma." Zhao Xie clapped her hands and said happily, "What a coincidence, I came here just to look for you at the old house." The two had the same destination, so they traveled together. Zhao Huiwei kept asking Zhao Xie about the situation along the way. "Second aunt, how is Grandma feeling recently?" Zhao Xie knew that the little girl was frightened, so she deliberately put on a stern face to scare her. "It's not good, it's very bad. Just yesterday Yi Jier made a mistake, and your grandma was so angry that she broke 2 sticks. She knew Yi Jier. He was the youngest son of her aunt Zhao Wu. His name was Zhao Chenyi and he was only 6 years old this year. In Zhao Huiwei's memory, her most precious grandson is this little grandson. Now he was so angry that he not only started fighting, but also broke the stick. Then she. Without Brother Yi's favor, would she be able to come out alive after entering the old house? Zhao Huiwei slowly stopped walking. "Well, second aunt, I won't go. I'll trouble you to bring the things to Grandma." Zhao Xie burst out laughing. "Aren't you afraid that your grandma will come to your house and beat you up?" Zhao Huiwei thought about it and felt that Zhao Qianxia could really do such a thing. Although she doted on her grandson, she would not spoil him. If he made a mistake, she would beat him until he cried. Zhao Huiwei wilted, I'm scared. Don't be afraid, I'm just scaring you. Your grandma won't bear to hit you. Zhao Xie comforted. Soon we arrived at the old house. The house is made of blue bricks and tiles and looks very old. It is built like a large courtyard. Zhao Huiwei walked in and found that the yard was very clean. There are 2 fruit trees and a grape trellis planted in the yard. The grapevines are already in bloom and look furry and very beautiful. The hen in the yard was hiding in the shade under a tree with her chicks. 2 children were playing around the grape trellis, and Zhao Huiwei could hear their laughter from outside. Seeing someone coming in, the 2 children stopped what they were doing and rushed over with a smile. Sister, you're here. Zhao Huiwei squatted down, touched their heads, and took out 2 candies from his pocket. This one is for Brother Yi, and this one is for Brother Fan. The 2 children are Zhao Wu's youngest son Zhao Chenyi and Zhao Xie's eldest son Zhao Fan, who are 8 years old this year. Zhao Wu has 2 sons and 1 daughter. The eldest son, Zhao Borui, is a student who just turned 16 this year. He is now studying in a private school in the county. The eldest daughter, Zhao Dingning, is 18 years old this year. She married to a man in a neighboring village last year and now rarely comes back except during the Chinese New Year. So Zhao Huiwei is currently the oldest among this group of children. The 2 children received the candies and said happily, "Thank you, sister." Zhao Xie smiled and drove them away, "Go play somewhere else and don't bother your sister." As he said this, he took Zhao Huiwei into the main hall. The moment Zhao Huiwei walked in, she regretted it. I saw that the first seat was occupied by Zhao Qian, and on the left sat the eldest uncle Zhao Leiwei, who looked very dark and strong, with tough features. Next to him sat his wife Zhao Wu, a woman who looked very gentle. On the right sat the second uncle Zhao Leia, who was also dark and strong, but his facial features looked rather honest, and one could tell at a glance that he was a simple farmer. The second aunt's wife, who had just come in, also sat down leisurely. Why does it look like a trial by 3 judges? What are you doing? Zhao Huiwei asked. Zhao Qian snorted heavily, her wrinkled face full of seriousness. But Zhao Huiwei could not stand this kind of atmosphere. In the past, when she made mistakes, her father would just let her correct them with a smile. But here, she felt as if she was in the scene of interrogation of a prisoner. He said with a stiff upper lip, "Grandma, just tell me what's going on." Seeing the little girl blinking her eyes, Zhao Qian's heart softened at once. Hui, did you know that you have already reached the age of marriage? How could Zhao Huiwei not know? She came of age last year, so she is already 16 this year. Chapter 34. What do you want? Originally, you should have started preparing for marriage after you came of age, but Madame Yarn kept postponing the matter on the grounds that Mr. Yarn had passed the imperial examination. It was pushed back to after the provincial examination in August this year, but now, your marriage has been cancelled because you saved a man. Zhao Huiwei's face turned black when she heard this. Seeing her grandmother's distressed expression, it was not because of the imperial examination, it was obvious that he really didn't want to marry her. Zhao Huiwei couldn't bear to hit the old lady so hard that she could only say, "Grandma, I found the person on the mountain. Since I saw him, there was no way I wouldn't save him. It's still a life after all." Zhao Qianxia understood the truth, but it was difficult for her to accept it. Grandma knows you have good intentions, but even if you really left to save people, the villagers would definitely slander you behind your back even if they don't say anything. It's not right for a little girl like you to live in the same room with a grown man. How are you going to get married in the future if you continue like this? Zhao Qian sighed heavily, and the uncles on both sides nodded in agreement. The eldest uncle Zhao Leiwei spoke up the next second, "Sister Hui, why don't you ask the injured young master to move to the old house, and we will help you take care of him?" No. Zhao Huiwei refused directly, so quickly that everyone present was stunned. How could she bring disaster to the old house? Isn't that harming people? Second uncle Zhao Leia looked at her strangely, "Are you attracted to that young master?" What? Zhao Qian was startled, and her drooping eyes looked at her quickly. Not to mention Zhao Qianxia, even Zhao Huiwei herself was shocked. He quickly shook his head and denied it, "I'm not. I didn't. Don't talk nonsense." The 3 consecutive denials were forceful, and Zhao Huiwei's expression was even more terrified than theirs. Everyone. If there is no such thing, then there is no such thing. Why are you so frightened? They all thought that the young master would eat people. Uncle, I really don't want to trouble you. Besides, the young master will leave after he recovers from his injuries. He is also a man of his duty. He will stay in the inner room of my house to recover from his injuries. It is difficult for us to even see him once. Zhao Huiwei almost said that the pure and innocent villain looked down on her. But Zhao Qianxia was still worried, but this will damage your reputation. What if you are introduced to someone in the future and the other person's family minds this? Zhao Qian slapped her knees with both hands, and once again she was filled with grief and indignation. What do you want? Zhao Huiwei, what do you want? Because he is rich. He promised that he would reward her after he recovered and left. She has always held on to this belief. Zhao Huiwei said righteously, there is nothing between me and him. If others despise me, then I won't marry him. Besides, she is only 16 years old and still a minor. She was not willing to get married so early. How can a woman not marry? Zhao Qian slapped the table with her hands. Seeing Zhao Huiwei's firm attitude, she said slowly, okay, let's stop here for today. As for that young man, just let him take care of him for the time being. Grandma will keep an eye out for a good family for you, don't worry. After you said that, she became even more worried. Zhao Huiwei quickly left the bowl of chicken and ran away. If she stayed any longer, she felt that her lifelong event had been decided. Zhao Huihua walked home along the field in a good mood. Even the scenery that she had already seen tired of before seemed more beautiful. Today, she saw Shen Mingnan as she wished. He looked even more handsome than when they first met. He also responded to her words and told her not to worry. Now in her heart, Shen Mingnan is simply the embodiment of a gentle gentleman. If she really wants to get married, she wants Shen Mingnan. After returning home, Zhao Huihua found her father sitting at the door. After seeing her come back, he was full of joy. Jie, you came at the right time. Dad was just about to tell you a happy event. Zhao Huihua held the village chief Zhao Muyong's hand affectionately and said coquettishly, what's the matter, Dad? Did you buy me some nice clothes again? Zhao Muyong laughed and joked, you little girl, why do you think about buying clothes every day? Wouldn't it be better to let your husband buy them for you after you get married? Zhao Huihua blushed. She thought of Shen Mingnan and said shyly, Dad, tell me, what's the matter? Zhao Muyong laughed twice before saying, this time it's about your lifelong event. Young Master Zhang in town has agreed to marry you. The Zhang family will come to propose marriage in a few days. Chapter 35 Marriage. Zhao Huihua's smiling face froze, and her rosy complexion slowly turned pale. What did she hear? Was she going to marry Master Zhang? No, it's not possible. She violently shook off Zhao Muyong's hand, with a look of disbelief on her face, and shouted, impossible, you lied to me, I don't want to marry, I won't marry. Then he turned and ran into the room. Not marrying. Zhao Muyong was completely confused by her actions. This marriage was Zhao Huihua's own request. She looked down on the country folk in the village and insisted on marrying into the town to make a name for herself. Now that this marriage has finally come about, she is deciding not to get married with just a word. Then how should he explain it to Mr. Zhang's family? Zhao Muyong's face turned as black as the bottom of a pot, and he wished he could rush in and beat this evil girl up right now. Uncle Village Chief, are you home? Zhao Muyong was just about to go and have a good talk with Zhao Huihua when someone came to the door. He suppressed his anger and opened the door, only to find that the person was Zhao Huiwei, who lived at the foot of the mountain. His expression relaxed a lot. Hui, why did you come here at this time? What's the matter? Zhao Huiwei had a conflicted look on her face, and was holding a basket in her hand that was covered with a piece of cloth so you couldn't see what was inside. She quietly peeked inside and whispered, is Sister Huihua home? Zhao Muyong was furious when he thought of what Zhao Huihua had just said. He thought Zhao Huiwei was looking for Zhao Huihua, so he said directly, she's not here. Unexpectedly, Zhao Huiwei breathed a sigh of relief, that's good. Question mark. Uncle Village Chief, it's like this. Sister Lotus has been sending gifts to my house these past 2 days, and I feel so ashamed to accept them. Oh, right, before she left today, she said she would send me some herbs. When I thought about how Sister Lotus sent me so many things, and how my family is poor and I can't give anything in return, I felt guilty. Please tell Sister Lotus to stop sending me things. And I accepted the things Sister Lotus gave me before. In this basket are some cakes I bought in town. I brought them here for you to try. It's also a thank you to Sister Lotus for taking care of me these past 2 days. After Zhao Huiwei finished her conversation, she left the basket and went away. Zhao Muyong opened it and saw that it really was a few packages of pastries. But why would his Hihua go to deliver something to Zhao Huiwei? These days, Zhao Huiwei came with a basket and said she was going to the mountain to pick wild vegetables. When she came back, there were no wild vegetables and she looked very worried. When he thought of the injured strange young man who was staying at Zhao Huiwei's house, sweat broke out on his forehead. Although everyone knew about Zhao Huiwei's broken engagement that day, and he also heard that Zhao Huiwei saved a young man named Shen, he didn't pay much attention to it. But now, his daughter goes to Zhao Huiwei's house every few days. What else doesn't he understand? I guess it's because my evil daughter has fallen in love with someone else's young master. No wonder she begged to go and see the young master of the Zhang family a few days ago, but regretted it today. Zhao Muyong sneered. Seeing that the other party was about to propose marriage, she had to marry him whether she wanted to or not. Unless the marriage is successful, he will not let Zhao Huiwei go out. Zhao Huiwei was walking home in a good mood. How could she not know that Zhao Huiwei was at home? Not only did she know she was there, she also wanted her to listen to every word she said. She was not afraid that Zhao Huiwei would take revenge on her. She had caused so much trouble since she was a child that she was not afraid. Along the way, she met uncles, aunts and uncles who were surveying their own fields. Zhao Huiwei greeted them in a friendly manner, and when she was tired, she went under a tree to seek shade. There were 2 aunts under the tree, one surnamed Li and the other surnamed Wang. They were eating melon seeds, peeling beans and chatting about gossip. Zhao Huiwei listened to some of it in a way that pleased her ears. Aunt Wang said, "Have you heard? Huerpi's mother died." Another Aunt Li exclaimed, "What? When did it happen?" "She was found this morning. It is said that she had been dead for several days. When Sun Ernyang passed by his door today, she smelled a foul odor. When she went in and knocked on the door, she found that it was not closed. Huerpi's mother was dead on the ground with a big hole on her forehead." Aunt Li sighed, "What a sin. What's going on? Can that Huerpi come back to collect his mother's body?" Aunt Wang's face is full of disdain when it comes to Huerpi. He is over 30 years old and still a bachelor. He steals and does not work all day long. He is good at eating, drinking, whoring and gambling. Most importantly, he is a scoundrel. Chapter 36. Sir, do you feel okay? He stole money from somewhere every day and spent it on drinking and partying in the town. Aunt Wang looked disgusted. Yes, of course he wouldn't. But it was his cousin who brought him back from Zui Xiangyuan in town. It's really pitiful for Aunt Ju. She worked hard all her life, but ended up like this in her old age. Aunt Li sighed and changed the topic to something else, such as who gave birth to a fat boy, whose daughter married who, whose family had a wedding, etc. Zhao Huiwei gave an affirmative thumbs up in her heart. She was worthy of being the mainstay of the village gossip source. Wherever the aunt was, she would never let people down. After resting for a while, Zhao Huiwei said goodbye to her 2 aunts and left. She also knew Huerpi. After searching the original owner's memory, she found that there was indeed such a person. However, the original owner hated this kind of ruffian the most and ignored him at all. As a result, very little is known about Huerpi. However, the original owner had never dealt with Huerpi, but had contact with his mother, Aunt Ju. The original owner was kind-hearted and saw that Aunt Ju, a sick woman, had difficulty even getting enough to eat at home, so she went home and made a dozen coarse flour-steamed buns and sent them to her. Later, Aunt Ju brought some vegetables as a return gift. After a few visits, they became familiar with each other. However, he did not expect to hear the news of Aunt Ju's tragic death today. As a result, Zhao Huiwei had an even worse impression of that Huerpi. After returning home, Zhao Huiwei estimated that it was already the afternoon and time to prepare dinner. As soon as she entered the yard, she saw Shen Mingnan sitting in a chair with his eyes closed. The afternoon breeze blew gently, lifting his hair in front of him and making it sway slightly. Zhao Huiwei walked over in a good mood and said, "Sir, are you hungry?" After hearing her voice, Shen Mingnan slowly opened his eyes and looked her up and down with his dark eyes. He saw that her face was rosy and her tone was cheerful. Wasn't she much more lively than when she was with him? "So you're so happy to see that who or something?" Shen Mingnan was in a bad mood. In his heart, Zhao Huiwei was already half his maid. How could she flirt with other men without his permission? Even if we want to arrange a marriage, he has to give his approval first. Just look at the dark and sturdy man I met this morning. Not to mention his ferocious look, but one punch from him would have killed Zhao Huiwei, who had such weak arms and legs. At this moment, Shen Mingnan thought a lot. Seeing that he didn't say anything and looked at her with his deep black eyes, Zhao Huiwei couldn't help but feel uneasy. What was wrong with this man? He was so moody every day. Her good mood disappeared in an instant. Zhao Huiwei was just about to think of an excuse to slip away when she heard him say calmly, "I'm not hungry. Come and give me a shoulder rub." Zhao Huiwei. Does he really treat her as his maid? Zhao Huiwei was indignant in her heart, but she had to put on a smile on her face. "Okay, sir." Rolling up her sleeves, Zhao Huiwei stood behind him and pressed her two small hands on his shoulders with great effort. Seeing that he didn't say a word, Zhao Huiwei took the time to ask, "Sir, is this strength okay?" Shen Mingnan replied coldly, "It's okay." After pressing for about a quarter of an hour, Zhao Huiwei's hands were sore. Sweat broke out on his forehead, so he stopped what he was doing and continued to ask, "Sir, do you feel okay?" Shen Mingnan turned his head and saw her soft little hand on his shoulder. The constant heat from her palm was transferred to his body through his clothes. Shen Mingnan, who hated being touched by others, was not disgusted by this feeling. He didn't know when he stopped hating Zhao Huiwei's approach. Continue. Grass. Zhao Huiwei's face turned red from holding back the pressure, and she involuntarily increased the strength in her hands. She kept pressing like this for another quarter of an hour before Shen Mingnan let her go as if he was doing her a favor. Before leaving, she kindly gave Zhao Huiwei some advice. "I think you are too weak and should do more physical exercise." Zhao Huiwei, who had used up all her breast strength, said, "Okay, she will go and pick up all her martial arts skills again, and she is determined to train herself into a strong Barbie doll who can send you packing with one punch." Zhao Huiwei gave an awkward but polite smile. "You are right, sir." Chapter 37, The Cat Cries the Rat, False Mercy. When cooking dinner, Zhao Huiwei's hands were shaking. She suddenly felt very sympathetic towards Yang Yuan and the others. It must be very hard to follow such a master. After dinner, Zhao Huiwei brought medicine to Shen Mingnan and went to boil water for a bath. When boiling water, Zhao Huiwei thought of Shen Mingnan. He said he would pay for a new bucket, but where is the bucket now? When I went to call Shen Mingnan to take a bath, he didn't say anything but strode towards the bathroom. Zhao Huiwei didn't dare to ask him, so she could only say, "Sir, the water temperature has been adjusted for you. When you take a bath, you must pay attention to the wound on your hand and don't let it get wet." Her subconscious meaning, the bucket is still the same one from yesterday, it has been changed. Shen Mingnan paused for a moment and replied, "Got it." After Zhao Huiwei finished washing, she tidied the room and got into the thin quilt. She was wondering whether to go to town or the county tomorrow. Xinglian town used to be Jinyuan County, and it takes about an hour to get there by ox cart. As for her memory of the county, the original owner had only been there once, when her father took her there when he was still alive. Although the town is lively, it is far less prosperous than the county. If Zhao Huiwei wants to find business opportunities, she has to go to the county town to investigate. After making a rough plan in my mind, I closed my eyes and fell asleep. The next morning, Zhao Huiwei made several pancakes with white flour, steamed several buns with chicken and pickled vegetable fillings, and cooked thick white porridge. She called Yang Yuan to eat together, and told him that she might not be back at noon, and asked him to take care of his master's lunch. Zhao Huiwei made a lot of breakfast, enough for them to have lunch. Seeing that Yang Yuan was eating pancakes and had no time to reply to her, but just nodded continuously, Zhao Huiwei was speechless. He took 2 pancakes and went to the village entrance to take old Liu's car. As soon as Zhao Huiwei reached the entrance of the village, she heard crying and shouting from behind. When I turned around, I saw 4 men carrying a coffin towards the back of the hill. Next to the coffin was a man with a pointed face and monkey cheeks. He was hunched over, his face was covered with snot and tears. He cried out, "Oh my God, why did you leave like this? I haven't done my best to show my filial piety to you yet. What will I do when you are gone?" The sound of crying and shouting gradually spread to Luohur village, attracting many people to stand at their doorsteps and watch. A whispering sound spread around. "Humph, the cat cries over the rat, it's just fake mercy. When his mother was alive, he never came back to show his filial piety. That's right. This Uneasy came back to pretend to be a good guy. Isn't he afraid that someone will poke his spine? Alas, this person's death is as extinguished as a light. Poor Aunt Ju died without even a decent funeral. She was just carried up the mountain in a thin coffin and buried. All right, stop talking. Aren't you afraid of his revenge if he hears you? If he has the guts, come and do it. I don't believe I can't deal with this thing. Zhao Huiwei listened to people's chaotic discussions, but she had an indescribable feeling in her heart. In this melodramatic novel, except for those necessary characters, those who are like cannon fodder are all mentioned briefly, and their lives are not written in detail. Living at the bottom of society, Zhao Huiwei can feel that they are all alive, their joys and sorrows are real, and this is a real world. Zhao Huiwei shook off the distracting thoughts in her mind, got on old Liu's car and set off for the town. After arriving in the town, she asked old Liu where to take the bus to the county town. When old Liu heard that she was going to the county town, he thought for a moment before saying, "Go to the south entrance of the town. There are horse-drawn carriages and ox-drawn carts going to the county town." When Zhao Huiwei heard that there was a horse-drawn carriage available, she asked about the price. A horse carriage takes about half an hour to get to the county town and costs 3 cents, while an ox cart takes about an hour and costs 2 cents. After saying goodbye to old Liu, Zhao Huiwei headed towards the south entrance of the town and decisively chose to take a horse-drawn carriage. The ox cart was so bumpy that she could hardly hold on. In addition to Zhao Huiwei, there were several young women in the carriage. On their way to the county town, Zhao Huiwei was speechless again. She didn't feel that the horse-drawn carriage was much better than the ox-drawn carriage. It was still just as bumpy. The only good thing is that it can block the dust on the road. Chapter 38. She is just a little cannon fodder. Zhao Huiwei sat in the corner of the carriage with a very low sense of presence. She only found out from the women in the carriage that they were going to the county town to visit her husband who was studying in a private school in the county town. Speaking of private schools, Zhao Huiwei couldn't help but think of Zhao Borui. This boy is 1 month younger than her and can be considered her younger brother. I am studying in the county town now, and I usually don't go home except during the holidays. The carriage shook all the way and finally arrived at the county town. If it continued to shake, Zhao Huiwei couldn't guarantee that she wouldn't vomit immediately. It was not until she stepped on the ground and breathed the fresh air that Zhao Huiwei felt alive again. There were people coming and going all around. Zhao Huiwei looked up and saw the tall and imposing city gate with the words Jinyuan County written on it. Zhao Huiwei followed the crowd and walked in. This place was several times larger than Xinglin Town. There was only a straight and flat blue stone road, with houses lined up on both sides of the road. The street was crowded with people, including tea houses, wine shops, workshops, pawn shops, and some small vendors on the roadside. Most of the passers-by were ordinary civilians, and a very small number were young ladies and noble ladies. They were dressed in silk and satin, with pearls and emeralds in their hair, showing their wealth. Zhao Huiwei looked down at her dress. Although it was clean, it was dusty and looked like she came from the countryside. Too careless. She should have worn her pale pink dress. Zhao Huiwei complained in her heart and began to search for her target, investigating the food in this place. The background of this book is a fictional dynasty called Dian Dynasty, a dynasty with a history of 63 years. The current emperor ascended the throne 18 years ago and changed the reign title to Zhaokang. Under his rule, the Dian dynasty could not be said to be prosperous, but it was not too bad either. It could only be said to be average. Now that a small county town is so lively, Zhao Huiwei guessed that other places should be similar. The street is lined with shops and a wide variety of goods. Food alone takes up half of the street. Just as Zhao Huiwei thought, they were all ordinary pastries, and the slightly more expensive ones were some dried fruits. Then she went to the restaurant. There were 2 big restaurants in Jinyuan County that were equally matched. One is called Ruoshengshuan and the other is called Linglong. The 2 restaurants are almost facing each other and stand at the intersection with the heaviest customer traffic. Zhao Huiwei entered Ruoshengshuan. The waiter saw a customer coming in and hurried to greet her. When he found out that it was Zhao Huiwei, a young lady dressed in shabby clothes, he did not show any disgust. Zhao Huiwei nodded secretly in her heart, thinking that the quality of the employees here was quite good. There were many diners in the restaurant. Zhao Huiwei found a random seat on the first floor, looked at the various stir-fried dishes in the restaurant, and finally ordered one of their signature dishes, the 100-flower fish roll. The dish came out very quickly. It was juicy and had a nice fish flavor. The slices of fish looked beautiful like flowers. Zhao Huiwei picked up a piece of fish and took a bite. The fishy smell was not completely removed, the soup was a bit salty, and the fish was a bit overcooked. There are problems everywhere, how can it be called a signature dish? Waiter! Ask your shopkeeper to come over. The waiter had been waiting behind her. When he saw her face change drastically after taking just one bite, he thought that she might be trying to dine for free. Zhao Huiwei wanted to seize this opportunity. In real life, she likes to eat and look at recipes, but she has no interest in cooking. In her mind were recipes for dishes that were not available here. She decided to test the character of the shopkeeper by taking out one dish first, but who knew? The waiter's expression changed from gentle to fierce the moment she heard her call him shopkeeper. What are you yelling for? Your food. Before Zhao Huiwei could finish her words, she was pushed by the waiter. The food in my restaurant is great. If you want to dine for free, don't you know whose territory this is? Zhao Huiwei was simply stunned and waved her hands hastily. No, I want to see your shopkeeper. The waiter snorted coldly, you can't just go and see our boss whenever you want. I won't hit you because you're a girl. Leave now, this is really unlucky. The waiter said as he took away the fish and the plate. The diners around were attracted by the commotion here and looked over here. Seeing that a little girl named Zhao Huiwei was accused of eating and dashing, they just smiled and passed it off. Just treat it as a fun event. Zhao Huiwei walked out of Ruoshengshuan depressed. Why was it that the heroines in the novels she read were always the best at everything? Even if they just sold recipes, they would become rich. But she was not even worthy of meeting the shopkeeper, let alone selling recipes. After thinking for a while, she found the answer. She was not the heroine, she was just a cannon fodder. Chapter 39 Kidnapping. Ruoshengshuan. The shopkeeper upstairs watched everything that happened below with sharp eyes. He didn't wave until the waiter came up and asked, have you sent him away? The waiter nodded and said, I chased her away. I found out that the girl not only wanted to eat a free meal, but also wanted to discredit our Ruoshengshuan. I don't know where she got this idea from. The shopkeeper of Ruoshengshuan sneered, who else could it be except that couple? In this way, without Zhao Huiwei's knowledge, she was forced to become a spy. Zhao Huiwei was devastated at the moment and didn't even want to try Linglong Pavilion. Instead, she ran to the clinic, bought medicine for Shenmingnan, and then it was almost time to return to the village. Boom boom. Zhao Huiwei had just bought the medicine when the sky, which had been sunny for several days, began to thunder. As soon as she walked out of the clinic, it started to rain. Because of the rain, pedestrians on the street hurried home, and even small vendors closed their stalls to avoid the rain. Zhao Huiwei couldn't help but quicken her pace towards the city gate. Usually, carriages going to Xinglin town stopped at the city gate. Fortunately, there was a carriage ready to leave at the city gate. Zhao Huiwei shouted quickly, wait for me, wait for me. The carriage, which had just started, stopped at the sound of the shout. Zhao Huiwei quickly wiped the rain off her face, and hurriedly got into the carriage under the gaze of the coachman. She paused slightly after opening the curtain. There were 4 fierce-looking men sitting behind the curtain, and in the innermost part there seemed to be a bunch of people tied up with something unknown. Didn't she get on a black car? Thinking of this, Zhao Huiwei subconsciously took a step back. I suddenly remembered that there were still things left in the county, so I let me in. Before he could finish his words, he was pushed hard and fell into the carriage because he did not stand firmly. Zhao Huiwei ignored the pain and quickly shrank into the corner, looking very scared and not daring to raise her head. It was not until the carriage rushed out that the several strong men in the carriage looked at Zhao Huiwei. A big man with a full beard laughed and said, how come you can kidnap someone now and give one away for free? And give away a fair and tender young lady, har 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 har. The man next to him also laughed. He had a scar on his face that ran from the end of his eye to his jawbone, which looked very creepy. Who cares? I want to have sex with her now. I haven't touched a woman in days. As he said that, he reached out and pulled Zhao Huiwei. The space in the carriage was narrow and there was no way to hide. Zhao Huiwei dodged left and right but was still grabbed by him by one of her arms. The other hand was tightly holding the unconscious body on the ground. The bearded man frowned after seeing this. Second brother, we shouldn't make any trouble this time. It won't be too late to deal with this little village girl when we get to the place. The scarred man who was called the second brother thought that there was some truth in what he said, so he let go of Zhao Huiwei's hand and kept looking at her with his big eyes. The other two big men also laughed and said, "Don't worry, second brother. After this success, you can have any woman you want. There is no need to rush." The big men smiled at each other before changing the topic to other places. Zhao Huiwei was shaking all over. It was her first time encountering a real-life kidnapping incident, and she had brought it upon herself. How unlucky could it be? Guessing that their target this time was the person sleeping next to her, Zhao Huiwei took a closer look and saw that it was a fat kid around 8 or 9 years old, dressed richly, and obviously a kid from a wealthy family. Just as Zhao Huiwei was thinking about how to save herself, the fat boy next to her moved. Zhao Huiwei was afraid that he would be scared and make a sound, so she quickly covered his mouth with her hand and whispered, "Don't make a sound." The little fat boy woke up in a daze, and when he moved he found that he was tied up tightly. His eyes immediately filled with tears and he was about to cry out loud, but suddenly a hand covered his mouth and he hiccuped in shock. Zhao Huiwei. The four big men glanced towards them immediately. The scarred man laughed roughly, "Hey, big brother, the young master is awake, do you want to make him unconscious again?" The bearded man really didn't take the little brat seriously, and even didn't take Zhao Huiwei next to him seriously. He didn't even bother to tie her up with a rope. Two weaklings with little fighting power are really not worth mentioning. The bearded man's big eyes swept over the fat boy's frightened face and said, "No need." Chapter 40. Sister, what should we do? Zhao Huiwei released her hand that was covering the little fat boy and sat aside by herself. Now she had nothing on her except the medicine she bought for Shen Mingnan. If she had known earlier, she should have brought a knife for self-defense. After being depressed for a while, she thought again, if Shen Mingnan found out that she didn't go home at night, would he come looking for her? The thought flashed through her mind and was rejected by her. How could he save an insignificant person? Zhao Huiwei suddenly felt a little depressed, and then she felt a furry thing crawling into her arms. Zhao Huiwei turned her head and saw the little fat boy who had sat up by himself at some point. With tears in his eyes, he leaned into Zhao Huiwei's arms, as if he was looking for a safe haven. Zhao Huiwei pushed him, as if to say, "Stay away from me." She was very annoyed that she had gone out for a good time but accidentally got involved in this mess. The little fat boy didn't move. He looked at Zhao Huiwei with a pair of red eyes. Tears were falling from his eyes. He looked pitiful as he held back his tears. Alas, Zhao Huiwei sighed inwardly. Forget it, give him some comfort. So she pulled the little fat boy into her arms. After all, the little fat boy was also a victim, so there was no need for her to vent her anger on a child. The carriage swayed and we didn't know how far we had traveled until it stopped just before dark. Zhao Huiwei and the little fat boy were dragged into a dilapidated thatched house. Third brother, why did the eldest brother send the person to lose who? We can just let the young master come here to redeem him with silver. Why should we run so far? The man who spoke was the fourth among the four people, and everyone called him the fourth. The fourth brother was a little depressed because this place was far away from Lose Who. The third brother immediately made a gesture to silence him. "Stop talking, eldest brother has his own considerations, we just follow his lead." It was not until they locked the thatched hut that Zhao Huiwei felt truly disheartened. This train goes to Lose Who. Lose Who is tens of thousands of miles away from here, and it takes more than a month to drive there. Why would they send people all their way there? Zhao Huiwei then looked at the fat boy, who was also sitting on the ground in shock. Who are you? Why did these people want to send you to such a far place? The little fat boy was stunned for a moment, then he cried, I don't know. Zhao Huiwei rubbed her brows in pain and skipped this question for the time being. Your family is from Jinyuan. The little fat boy shook his head, his fair and tender face full of grievance. No, my home is in Beijing. You are from Beijing. How did you get abducted here from Beijing? I came here with my brother. Someone lied to me and said there were a lot of delicious food outside, so I went. Then when I woke up again, I was in the carriage. Woo woo woo. The little fat boy cried softly, as if he was afraid of attracting the four bad guys outside. Zhao Huiwei looked at the plump white ball and could tell that he was a foodie. May I have your name? The little fat boy cried and hiccuped, Shu Ziqian. Seeing his pitiful appearance, Zhao Huiwei took out a handkerchief from her bosom and gently wiped his cheek, wiping away the tears on his face. Don't cry. Then she loosened the rope on him, and as soon as it was loosened, he rushed over and said, Sister, what should we do? How could she know? Zhao Huiwei calmed down and comforted him. Don't be afraid, I will find a way. As soon as she finished speaking, the door unlocked. The man who came was a man with a scar. He was holding 2 steamed buns in his hand and threw them on the ground. He looked at Zhao Huiwei and the ball in her arms with a ferocious smile on his face. He said to Zhao Huiwei, Eat quickly. It will be easier to do things when you are full. Zhao Huiwei's heart sank to the bottom in an instant. They might not touch Shu Ziqian now, but Zhao Huiwei was just a little village girl with no status, and she would not be so kind as to think that they would let her go. The scarred man seemed very satisfied looking at the pale face of the young lady. Although she was a little thinner, she still looked iconic. Zhao Huiwei picked up the cold, steamed bun without moving. She hid the cold light in her eyes, and when she looked up again, her eyes were slightly red, and she looked so soft and weak that people felt pity for her. Hero, could you give us a bowl of water? Chapter 41. What about you, sister? The scarred man did not refuse when he heard this. He was happy to meet the young lady's last request. After locking the door, he went to get some water. Shu Ziqian seemed to be able to sense something. He held Zhao Huiwei's sleeves tightly with his hands and said in a voice as soft as a mosquito, Sister. Zhao Huiwei touched his head and whispered in his ear, You can't eat anything here. If you're hungry, just be patient for a while. I'll hold him back later. You should take this opportunity to run away and run to the dense forest in the south. Got it. She didn't dare eat the steamed bun given by the scarred man. She was afraid that he had drugged her, and if she fell asleep, then it would be all over. Zhao Huiwei looked at the full moon rising outside through the high window. When she got off the car just now, she carefully observed the surroundings. It was a desolate wilderness. This place was like a simply built shelter, but it was very hidden. With heavy trees as cover, few people can find this place. Shu Ziqian opened his eyes wide in surprise. What about you, sister? Zhao Huiwei patted his head and said with a smile, Little brat, if you have time to care about me, you might as well care about yourself. When the time comes, you have to run faster and run to where there are more trees. Don't let them catch me and distract me, which will hinder my plan. Then I will see how I deal with you. Shu Ziqian touched his head and retorted unhappily, I'm not a kid, I'm 9 years old. Well, you're not, so can you do your sister another favor? Shu Ziqian nodded without hesitation. Zhao Huiwei untied the 2 braids on her head and took out a hair rope with pearl flowers carved into the shape of peach blossoms. She used another to tie her loose hair back. Take this hair tie. If you can escape successfully, deliver it to Zhao Huiwei's home in Luohua village, Xinglin town. If the people inside see this hair tie, they will understand. Then you can tell them, just tell them. What are you talking about? That she lost her life saving a little kid. I guess Shen Mingnan would laugh at her and call her stupid when he finds out. Zhao Huiwei was silent for a second before continuing, Tell him to give all the rewards to me after he leaves Luohua village. At least she won't get any benefit from her remarried mother who abandoned her a long time ago. Shu Ziqian's eyes welled up with tears after hearing this. Wasn't this just making arrangements for his final arrangements? At the same time, he thought silently in his heart that he would run faster and ask for help when he met someone, no matter how much money they gave, he would not let Sister Huiwei die. The door was opened again, and the scarred man brought in a bowl of water in a porcelain bowl and placed it in front of Zhao Huiwei. Have a nice drink. I'll come see you later at night. The scarred man put down the water, looked meaningfully at Zhao Huiwei, who was kneeling on the ground with her head down, before turning and leaving. He wanted to monopolize this young lady to himself, so he didn't want to let his brothers know. After using her, he would simply abandon her in the wilderness. After all, she was just a village girl, and it was estimated that no one would dare to report her disappearance to the authorities. After the scarred man left, Zhao Huiwei poured the water out, and with a clang sound, the bowl broke into several pieces. Zhao Huiwei picked out the sharpest piece, held it tightly in her hand, looked at the full moon outside the window, and waited quietly for the scarred man to come. Zhao Huiwei heard the sound of the door lock while half asleep and half awake. She quickly pushed Shu Ziqian. The sky outside was getting darker. Zhao Huiwei estimated that it should be the hour of high. The room was pitch black. As the door opened, a small candlelight shone in, then expanded, illuminating the centipede-like face of the scarred man. Xu Ziqian shrank into Zhao Huiwei's arms in fear. Scarface didn't care when he saw that the rope on the fat boy was gone. "Little beauty, come out with me." The scarred man laughed and reached out to grab Zhao Huiwei's arm. Zhao Huiwei looked pale and helpless, with tears welling up in her round almond-shaped eyes. In the eyes of the scarred man, she looked extremely attractive. He just felt hot all over. "No, no, don't touch me, get away." Zhao Huiwei struggled with her hands and feet. Even Xu Ziqian held the scarred man's hand tightly, his face flushed red. "Let my sister go." The scarred man was annoyed by the little fat guy and pushed him away with just his hand. He pulled Zhao Huiwei out without saying anything. Zhao Huiwei's strength was nowhere near that of the strong man, and after struggling for a few times, her wrist was bruised. Chapter 42. I thought I'd never see you again. Zhao Huiwei was half pushed and half pulled, and was taken out. Outside, there was the sound of insects and birds chirping, and no other sound was heard. Just as the scarred man was about to turn around and lock the door, Zhao Huiwei took advantage of his unpreparedness and threw him to the ground, shouting into the door, "Go!" The little fat man rushed out like a little cannonball. The man with the scar was stunned for a moment, then he became furious as he looked at the young lady who pounced on him. He was about to push the person away, but Zhao Huiwei raised her hand, holding a blood-stained porcelain piece, and her eyes flashed with a cold and broken light. The hand fell quickly, and the porcelain piece went towards the scarred man's carotid artery. The scarred man turned his head away in horror, but still left a bloody cut on his face. When Zhao Huiwei saw that he was not hurt in vital areas, a hint of regret flashed in his eyes. The noise they made here woke up the three strong men in another room. The bearded man hurried out and saw that the thatched hut was empty. The man with the scar was now being knocked to the ground by the weak young girl. The third and fourth brothers' faces changed drastically, and they quickly ran towards the woods without the bearded man's order. They couldn't lose the young master. The scarred man swung his hand violently and slapped Zhao Huiwei on the face, knocking her to the ground. He really didn't expect that this young lady who pretended to be weak and timid actually had a fierce temper. The scarred man climbed up cursing, "Bitch, I'm going to kill you." Zhao Huiwei was hit so hard that her eyes went dark. The man with the scar raised a knife and chopped down fiercely. Zhao Huiwei subconsciously rolled on the ground and barely dodged it. The knife hit the ground with a dull sound. Zhao Huiwei slowly shrank back with the instinct of survival. The scarred man sneered and raised his hand high again, "Go to hell, bitch." Bite. The scarred man's knife, which he had raised high, was knocked to the ground, and he felt a sharp pain in the palm of his hand where he was holding the knife. He looked up in surprise, and saw two sandbag-like objects suddenly thrown out from the dark forest and hit him at his feet. In the light of the candle, they finally saw what the two sandbag-like objects were. But it was the third and fourth brothers who were beaten so badly that their lives were in danger. They were both covered in blood and looked very scary. The bearded man was furious, staring at the darkness with his copper bell-like eyes. "Who is so vicious to hurt my brother? Get out here." Zhao Huiwei also looked and saw a man walking out as if he was strolling in the garden. He was dressed in black and blended into the entire darkness. There was a casual smile on his handsome face, especially his pair of dark peach blossom eyes, which glanced at the beard nonchalantly. Even though he didn't show it, the bearded man still felt despised and that he was not taken seriously at all. This realization made him even angrier. But he was always sensitive to danger, and the strange man in front of him gave him a greater sense of danger than any other person. He clasped his fists and said to the man, "We have no grudges against you. Why did you hurt my third and fourth brothers?" Zhao Huiwei didn't care about the pain on her face at this moment. She even suspected that she was seeing things. Shen Mingnan actually came. His dark eyes stayed on her for a second before he looked at the bearded man, but the smile on his face disappeared, making people feel cold for no reason. "No grudges." He pointed at Zhao Huiwei, who was kneeling on the ground, and said slowly, "You touched my people, and you still dare to say that there are no grudges?" The bearded man was shocked. He turned around and saw Zhao Huiwei, who was dirty. She was also looking at Shen Mingnan with tears in her eyes. The man with the scar felt timid. He glanced at the third and fourth brothers lying on the ground and subconsciously took a step back. Shen Mingnan was too lazy to pay attention to the two people. Instead, he walked towards Zhao Huiwei and said, Yang Yuan, Yu Huai, clean up this place. Yes. There were two hidden shadows behind Shen Mingnan, and they ran towards the bearded man and the scarred man. The bearded man didn't have time to think and started fighting with the man with his knife. Shen Mingnan stood in front of Zhao Huiwei. He could see her swollen face when he looked down. Her almond-shaped eyes were full of water and she was as dirty as a little cat. His eyes were full of disdain. Why are you still sitting on the ground? Can't you get up? Zhao Huiwei blinked twice, and hot tears flowed down her cheeks. She suddenly stood up and threw herself into Shen Mingnan's arms and hugged him tightly. Woo, master, I thought I would never see you again. Chapter 43. Don't cry, I've avenged you. Due to inertia, Shen Mingnan was knocked back a small step by her. After he realized what was happening, his tone became a little irritable. Zhao Huiwei, you are so dirty, who allowed you to hug me? Let go now. Zhao Huiwei couldn't stop crying. Master, I missed you so much, I thought I was going to die. Shen Mingnan, who was originally irritable, heard this, and his ears turned red without Zhao Huiwei seeing. He still had a cold and aloof look and snorted, you are so stupid. You went out to buy medicine and still got kidnapped. Speaking of medicine, Zhao Huiwei became even sadder, tears streaming down her face, and she hiccuped and said, Master, they lost my, the medicine I bought. They beat me, scolded me, and didn't give me food to eat. Zhao Huiwei complained while sobbing. Her little nose was red from crying, and she couldn't stop her tears, and she couldn't wipe them away even with her sleeves. Shen Mingnan was silent for a few seconds, and then he sighed softly. He pointed at the scarred man who had been lying on the ground, and said softly, Don't cry. I've avenged you. Zhao Huiwei looked over and saw their four brothers lying neatly on the ground. Yang Yuan was not satisfied and kicked the scarred man a few times. Zhao Huiwei felt warm in her heart. She felt that there was something wrong with the author of this book. How could this be a villain? This was the light of righteousness. Especially the moment he appeared, the tense feeling in Zhao Huiwei's heart relaxed, and she knew she was saved. She looked down at her toes and said hoarsely, Master, thank you for saving me again. Shen Mingnan's dark eyes seemed to contain a smile, and he said nonchalantly, It's okay, remember, I'll come back later. Zhao Huiwei. Otherwise, she won't want the reward. What else can she use to pay back? Zhao Huiwei, who had escaped death, thought about this problem. In the original book, Shen Mingnan gave her 5,000 taels with a wave of his hand, and she, probably had about 260 taels left. As she was thinking, she suddenly thought of another question. Where is Shu Ziqian? Zhao Huiwei looked up and asked Shen Mingnan. Shen Mingnan raised his eyebrows slightly. Shu Ziqian? That little fat guy. Zhao Huiwei nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Fainted? Question mark. As if noticing Zhao Huiwei's confusion, Shen Mingnan kindly answered, This place is hidden quite deep. I was able to find it thanks to that little fat guy. He fell into the pit while running and made a noise, so I was able to find it. Zhao Huiwei, so it's announced to be over before it even started. Why would she place her hopes on him? If Shen Mingnan hadn't come, they would have finished the game. Zhao Huiwei covered her face and said helplessly, Then, did you fish it out? Shen Mingnan sneered, Instead of caring about others, you might as well care more about yourself. Why does this sound so familiar? Shen Mingnan walked up to the unconscious group of four and asked, Did you find anything? Yang Yuan shook his head and respectfully handed over a wooden plaque with the word, Tiger, engraved on it. They seemed to be bandits from the Dragon and Tiger Gang, and... Yang Yuan lowered his voice, the one they kidnapped seems to be Minister Shu's youngest son. I don't know why he ended up here. Minister Shu. The Minister of Personnel, Shu Youcai, is a staunch royalist. He didn't know who he offended, but someone behind the scenes attacked him. Shen Mingnan didn't care about these, and said calmly, Take that little fat boy back and throw him to Shu Yunchen. Yang Yuan took the order, turned around and disappeared into the woods. Yu Huai stepped forward, Master, what should we do with these people? Shen Mingnan didn't even bother to give a glance. You and 17 or 18 take the people back and see if you can get anything out of them. If you can't, just take them away and bury them. He was about to leave, but then he remembered something and pointed at the scarred man, Take this man back and treat him well. When Shen Mingnan passed by Zhao Huiwei, he paused, said two words, Follow me, and then walked forward. Zhao Huiwei followed closely like a little tail. On their way back, they took the carriage that Zhao Huiwei was tied up in. Since the 4 people had all been ambushed, the carriage was taken away by Zhao Huiwei and others. The driver was one of Shen Mingnan's men, named Yu Shijiu. Chapter 44 Sickness. Zhao Huiwei sat in the car, curled up her legs, and buried her head in her arms. Shen Mingnan sat diagonally opposite her with his eyes closed, occasionally looking up at her but not paying much attention. Until the carriage swayed and Zhao Huiwei fell suddenly downwards, Shen Mingnan subconsciously caught him in his arms. Looking down, I saw that the little girl in my arms had her eyes closed, her face was red, and sweat was on her forehead. As if she felt the temperature, she shrank towards the heat source, reached out and grabbed his collar, muttering, "Cold, so cold." Shen Mingnan. He couldn't throw away the person he was holding at the moment, nor could he not throw away the person. After a whole day of tossing and turning, the little girl in his arms probably fell ill due to excessive fright. Looking left and right, he helped her lie down on the side of the carriage. Shen Mingnan had never served anyone in his life. Looking at Zhao Huiwei's red face, he felt a headache. Fortunately, he arranged for someone to follow her, otherwise if this little fool got lost, he was not sure whether he could find her in the first place. Thinking of this, Shen Mingnan couldn't help but mutter, "It's really stupid. It's really troublesome." Since the city gate had already been closed, Shen Mingnan decided to return to Luohua village first. The carriage ran for about an hour, took a detic and stopped directly at the doorstep of Zhao Huiwei's house. Shen Mingnan got out of the car holding Zhao Huiwei's collar. Yu Shijiu was shocked when he saw this scene. His master was holding the girl's collar with a look of disdain. He looked at the girl's face again. She was such a good girl, and he was really afraid that she would be strangled to death by his master. Fortunately, the distance was not far. Shen Mingnan kicked open the door of Zhao Huiwei's east wing and threw her directly onto the bed. He stood there staring for a while before he covered her with the quilt as if giving arms and then left. "Is Yang Yuan back?" Shen Mingnan asked standing at Zhao Huiwei's door. Yu Shijiu replied respectfully, "Not yet. Tell 17 to go to the town clinic and ask for a doctor." Then he looked at himself being hugged and rubbed by Zhao Huiwei. The man with a bad look on his face continued to order, "Go boil some water for me, I want to take a bath." "Yes." I really don't know where she got the courage to run over to hug him even though she was covered in dirt. Thinking of Zhao Huiwei who was lying on the bed all dirty, Shen Mingnan couldn't bear it anymore. How could she go to bed if she wasn't clean? Thinking of this, he ran to Zhao Huiwei's room again. In the candlelight, he saw that her face was covered with tear marks and there was a red and swollen spot on her left cheek. Her clothes were covered with dust from the ground. Shen Mingnan hesitated for a moment, then walked out. When he came back in, he was holding a basin of water with Zhao Huiwei's face towel in it. He reached in and wrung out the face towel before slowly beginning to wipe Zhao Huiwei's little face. Shen Mingnan felt relieved only when the little face looked clean. Then he took out a medicine bottle and applied some medicine on her face. As for the clothes, it's better to wait until she wakes up before changing it. Then he soaked the face towel and placed it on her forehead before getting up and leaving. It was not until Shen Mingnan came out of the shower that Yu Shijiu came in with the doctor. "Master, the doctor is here." Shen Mingnan's hair was slightly wet and scattered behind him. Hearing this, he looked at the doctor with his dark eyes. He was an old doctor who looked to be in his 50s, with a medicine box on his shoulder. At the moment, he looked terrified. His whole body was shaking, and it was obvious that he was forcibly captured by Yu Shijiu. Shen Mingnan pointed at Zhao Huiwei's door and said, "Go and cure her." How could the old doctor dare to disobey? He was sleeping soundly at home when suddenly a man appeared, grabbed him and asked him to see a doctor. How could he dare to say anything with a knife in his hand? He followed along carrying a medicine box. It was not until he walked into the room that he discovered that the sick person was a little girl. The old doctor knew at a glance that it was a cold caused by evil wind entering the body. After taking the pulse and pondering for a moment, I was sure that it was a cold. He walked out of the room and looked at the black-robed man who was sitting lazily in the middle of the hall. He wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and took out 2 pills from the medicine box with trembling hands. The girl inside just caught a common cold. She will be fine after taking 2 pills. Shen Mingnan nodded and looked at Yu Shijiu, "Give the doctor some money." How could the old doctor dare to admit the patient? He was so scared that his face turned pale and he kept postponing the admission. Shen Mingnan said lazily, I asked you to come here to treat my illness, not to rob me. I just hope you will accept this money and keep what happened tonight a secret. The old doctor understood that this was hush money. He took 5 taels of silver from Yushichi's hand. Shen Mingnan ordered Yushichi, send the old doctor back. After Yushichi left, he said to Yushijiu, go and boil this medicine. Shen Mingnan looked at the sky and found that it was already Cho time after all the trouble. Chapter 45 I can drink it myself. After the medicine was ready, Shen Mingnan looked at the black liquid, condescended to pick up the bowl of medicine and entered Zhao Huiwei's room again. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he put the medicine on the cabinet beside him. He reached out and pushed Zhao Huiwei until she opened her eyes dazedly, and then he said in a good mood, benefactor, get up and take the medicine. Take medicine. Zhao Huiwei felt dizzy from the burning sensation in her head, and the first thing she saw was Shen Mingnan's rare gentle face. If it weren't for the obvious gloating expression on his face, she would have really thought he was doing this for her own good. Shen Mingnan picked up the medicine again and said, here, the medicine is not hot anymore, drink it while it's hot. Zhao Huiwei propped herself up, feeling weak all over. She smelled the medicine and rejected it. I don't want to drink it. Shen Mingnan said seriously, no, you have to drink it. And not a drop left. Zhao Huiwei felt that he was taking revenge on her for forcing him to take medicine some time ago. What a petty-minded man. Zhao Huiwei took it with a frown on her face, thinking that a short pain is worse than a long one, so she almost vomited after taking a sip. Shen Mingnan raised his eyebrows, drink quickly, I'm going to rest. Zhao Huiwei then looked at the sky outside. It was indeed very late. He negotiated, sir, you go and rest first. I can drink by myself. No. Shen Mingnan said in a tone that did not allow for refusal, I have to watch you drink. Thank you so much. Prepared herself mentally, Zhao Huiwei swallowed the drink in one gulp, her entire face wrinkled like a bitter gourd. Sir, do you have any candy? Shen Mingnan took the bowl and went out. When he reached the door, he said, no. The door creaked shut and Zhao Huiwei rested for a while before getting up and changing her dirty clothes. After drinking the medicine, Zhao Huiwei felt more and more dizzy, and soon fell into a deep sleep again. After Shen Mingnan went out, he found that Yang Yuan had returned. Why did you come back at this hour? Yang Yuan was a little annoyed. When I went there, I found that the city and the outside of the city were brightly lit, and the soldiers were searching everywhere for young Master Shu. When I sneaked into Master Shu's residence and was about to throw the little master onto his bed, I was caught on the spot. Shen Mingnan. Waste. Yang Yuan continued, I checked the surroundings and didn't see him before I went in. I didn't expect he had already arranged everything and was just waiting for someone to take the bait. It seems that he has something on him. Because of this thing, the people in the dark kidnapped the young master and forced him to hand it over. But he didn't expect that I would send the young master back. Master, I guess he will come to see you tomorrow. Shen Mingnan waved his hand, I understand, you can leave first. Yang Yuan felt a little guilty. He was afraid that Xu Yinshan's accident would disrupt his master's plan. His original intention was to send young Master Shu off safely and then leave, but he didn't expect that his negligence would lead to complications. Shen Mingnan didn't want to say more, so he turned around and went back to his room. He was tired after a busy day. Next day, Zhao Huiwei got up later than usual. She took some medicine and had a sweat last night, and her cold and fever are much better now. Her body was sticky, so Zhao Huiwei boiled some water to take a bath before making breakfast. Zhao Huiwei came out, covered in steam, and found that Shen Mingnan had also gotten up. He was sitting at the gate of the yard, still looking lazy. Zhao Huiwei greeted him with a smile on her face, good morning, sir. Shen Mingnan said lazily, it's late, I'm hungry. Zhao Huiwei casually tied up her half-dry hair and went to knead the dough. Due to time constraints, Zhao Huiwei made some fragrant pancakes and thick white porridge. She brought the food to the table and invited Shen Mingnan to have breakfast. After looking around for a while, he asked curiously, where's Yang Yuan? Why didn't he come? Shen Mingnan drank the porridge elegantly without saying a word. Zhao Huiwei didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she looked at Shen Mingnan's eating movements. He looked handsome and dignified, and the aura of a noble young man from an aristocratic family radiated from the inside out. Watching Shen Mingnan eat was actually a visual enjoyment, so much so that under his influence, Zhao Huiwei chewed her food more slowly than usual. Zhao Huiwei was a little dazed. What she experienced yesterday seemed like a dream that passed in a flash. Only a scratch left on the palm of the hand by the porcelain piece proves that everything is real. She held the porcelain shard with great force, determined to fight to the death, and after the incident, only pain remained in her palms. Seeing that Shen Mingnan had finished eating, he murmured a little aggrievedly, "Master, you applied medicine on my face yesterday, why didn't you apply some on my hands as well?"